What's up, everybody? How's it going? Welcome back to the stream. It's not Tuesday, but we're getting tactical anyway, because we have today something very exciting. All of the Chaos Knight Codex has been spoiled. There are some links around the internet, so if you... I'm sure if you search hard enough, you'll be able to find them. I got a copy last night, and so I spent the interim time taking down some notes about everything in this codex. So hopefully I can talk about it with a little bit more of an educated voice than I normally would talk about something that isn't a Tyranid Codex. So we'll see how we go. Now, obviously, Chaos Knights are not my forte. So one thing that I'm not gonna do is get super deep into the nitty gritty of the comparison between the old and the new Codex. There's some stuff that I can recollect pretty well, but I'm not gonna remember every single little detail of the 8th edition Codex. So if I misspeak at any point in that manner, then that would be why. Please don't crucify me for it. But yeah, we have the entirety of the 9th edition Chaos Knights Codex just up for grabs, so that's super exciting. Games Workshop leaking like a sieve over here with all these spoilers, but it's good for us because we have a lot to talk about. So I think we should get right into it. So what I'm going to do is just go through the entirety of the Codex and talk about, you know, the most interesting parts of it. Obviously, I have basically every page here. I think I have it all in the correct order for the most part as well. So hopefully we can talk about it kind of in a meaningful order. And yeah, I think we'll just do that. Hope everybody in chat is ready to go. How's it going, everybody in chat? Hope everyone's having a good Friday. Hope everyone has some good plans for the weekend. Maybe some games in. Maybe some Chaos Knight games. Ooh, oh boy. But we're starting on detachment abilities. So essentially, a lot of the detachment abilities are staying exactly the same as they were. So we can see that the towering foe and War Dog OBSEC remains. That's all still in there. So towering foe, War Dog's counting as 5 models. Titanic units counting as 10 models. War Dogs have OBSEC automatically, and there are ways to get OBSEC on the bigger knights as well. At least one. There's a Warlord trade for objective secured. That has remained all the way through. So that's pretty sick. We also see, I think, one thing that's pretty nice is this Fallen Hero ability. I talked about this a little bit previously when we were talking about the other Chaos Knight spoilers. This was an ability that was spoiled or leaked ages and ages ago, and I think it might literally have been this photo that this ability came out of. But it gives a single Dreadblade in a super heavy auxiliary the Agent of Chaos keyword, which means it can be inserted into other Chaos subfactions or other Chaos armies without breaking super faction abilities. And that is also referenced in the detachment abilities of the Chaos Knights themselves. So there are going to be some overarching mechanics that will come into play if you are playing entirely Chaos Knights, which also reference Agents of Chaos. So hopefully we see these Agents of Chaos in other codexes. That would be sick. The Year of Chaos is truly upon us. Towering Foe, like we just talked about, that is remaining the same. So you count as 5 models if you're Titanic, you count as 10 models for holding objectives. Good stuff. It's important to note that as with all other abilities of that type, that's only counted when you're considering who holds an objective marker. When you're scoring a secondary objective, so for example, retrieve knock-win data or engage at all fronts, not that it matters for knights because they're all vehicles anyway, you still do not count the additional models because you're not counting as holding an objective marker at that point. That just counts your raw model count. So you can't be like trying to do funky actions and stuff with your Chaos Knights and counting as extra. I actually don't know if there are any situations where that matters yet for Chaos Knights, but I don't know, who knows? There might be something in the future. The ambitions return. So we have Iconoclasts and Infernals. Those have actually remained mostly the same. Iconoclasts get +1 attack, +1 armor penetration in first round of combat. So charged, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention. You get +1 attack and AP. That's sick. You can actually stack. There's multiple ways to stack several attacks onto a melee knight in this codex, and you can be swinging some absolutely insane attack characteristics with these guys right now. So that's pretty fun. Infernal Household has changed a little bit. So it's in your command phase. You choose if you want to roll for one demonic trait off of the demonic surge table. So it's a D3 roll. A 1 gives you +3 move. A 2 gives you transhuman. And a 3 gives you +1 to wound with a single weapon. I believe previously the 1 gave you... I think it may have given you a bonus to advance and charge, because I think you could combo it with advance and charge and it would stack super high. The fortitude was +1 toughness, and the demonic power was +1 to wound and +1 damage. I think it was a dark technomancer's effect. Now it's just +1 to wound, but there are some other abilities that will supercharge individual weapons, and so you can kind of combo those together to make a single ranged weapon. If you have a knight with one ranged weapon and one melee weapon, for example, you can have those knights to be doing ridiculous damage. You take D3 mortal wounds if you choose one, and you take 1 mortal wound if you roll randomly. Obviously, that is an optional ability. You don't have to be taking the damage if you don't want any of the effects. Generally speaking, I think you're going to be taking D3 to choose one, rolling randomly, because these all do different things. It's probably not going to be what you want to be paying wounds for if you want to have control over it. But there are some effects that give you control over these and allow you to ignore the damage that you take from them. So you basically get a free roll on the Demonic Surge, so that's pretty cool. A little bit of a nerf to the Surge, but it's nice to see that those abilities are still in there. We have some of the sort of more specific detachment abilities where you can get your household benefits from your chosen household, and if you don't choose a household, you get a Dreadblade benefit. And there is a whole list of the Dreadblade benefits. One weird thing is that the Dreadblade keyword, I believe, replaces your house keyword, which means it is a selectable keyword, so you may not be able to take Dreadblades in addition to a normal household. You might have to take entirely Dreadblades, but I'm not 100% sure on that one, so don't totally quote me on that. There are also some ways for your detachments to refund their command points. So if we talk about Traitorous Lances here, if you're in a super heavy detachment, you can pick one model to be the character so that he can be assigned warlord traits and relics for free. There's another way to make things characters, but you don't necessarily have to. So it's not like the previous version of Knights where you have, like, there's a lot of, you can basically upgrade multiple models to be characters to get access to heroic interventions and stuff like that. It's going to be a little bit less, the character keyword is going to be spread around a little bit less, but there are ways to do it. If your super heavy has between 1 and 2 abhorrent models or 3 and 5 war dog models, you refund your CP if your warlord's part of it, so kind of the battalion detachment thing. You get +3 command points if your warlord is there. And if it's big, then you refund the big command points in the Traitorous Lands. So if you can play a single super heavy detachment, which you probably should be able to do, you should be playing with lots of CP. A lot of these strats are 1 CP when spent on a war dog and 2 CP when spent on the big knights. So if you have 3 or 4 or even 5 of the big knights, that's going to be bleeding your CP quite a bit, but there are a lot of ways to regenerate CP in this codex. So you actually should be probably pretty fine on command points over the course of the game. All right, so we can talk about the households in specific. So yeah, you have a household keyword, and you get all the abilities. It's a sub-faction. Everybody knows how those work. I don't know if we need to talk about this page too much. So let's talk about the households real quick. I do have them broken down into Iconoclast and Infernal. We'll talk about Iconoclasts first because they're here. Herpatrax gives you additional wounds. It used to be 1 for war dogs and 2 for the big knights, and I believe it's that's what it used to be, and now it's 2 for war dogs and 4 for the big knights. I will give you a little bit of a spoiler already. The data sheets for the knights, like the base profiles for the knights and war dogs, didn't really change. So that means knights would be going up to 14 wounds, and the big knights would be going up from 24 to 28 or 32 for the larger ones, for the tyrant class knights. They give you a stratagem that pulses at the end of the fight phase mortal wounds out. It's not that exciting, as well as you ignore modifiers and your as their warlord trait. So it ignores modifiers to hit, wound, or damage, modifiers to advance or charge, and modifiers to their characteristic profile. So anything that's like -1 ballistic skill, for example, the new indirect fire rule, that will not affect them, which is pretty cool. Only for the warlord trait, then the relic gives you -1 to be hit in melee. Yeah, I'm actually wondering if we should go through. Before we go through too far of the sub-factions, we can break our order a little bit here, because it will matter a little bit, and talk about the other faction abilities. So I think that's what we're going to do. I'm going to... Look at all these. Look at all these pages we got to talk about, chat. Oh my god, it's so exciting. Let's talk about Harbingers of Dread before we get too far. So we're gonna move off sub-factions real quick, because some of the sub-factions do utilize this mechanic, and this is a brand new mechanic. Now, there are... a lot of this is going to reference a special mechanic called, I believe it's Dread Range, which is this little icon here. So anytime you see this little funky-looking skull icon, it's referencing this Dread Range. Dread Range is literally just, if in effect, a 12-inch aura, but it's like a contagion in that it doesn't count as an aura ability. And there are things that will affect Dread Range or reference Dread Range. At its base level, it's just a 12-inch bubble, effectively. So anytime we talk about that, that's what it's talking about. So Harbingers of Dread is the faction ability for Chaos Knights. It gives you a combat doctrine style effect, but it is, to be honest, a little bit confusing. I don't love this ability just because they've kind of overcomplicated how it works. So essentially, you have, very similar to combat doctrines, you have 3 of these different sort of doctrine effects: Doom, Despair, and Darkness. On turn 1, you start by getting a Doom effect. And as we see on our our ridiculous chart over here, every battle round is when that effect is in play, and you get the corresponding rule out of each of these 3 options for the corresponding battle round. So, for example, you always start and end on Doom. So battle rounds 1 and 5 are always using Doom, which is why we only have the 1 ability here. You get this effect. Once you go to battle round 2, at the start of battle round 2, you're going to choose one of these 3 options, either Despair, Doom, or Darkness. As soon as you choose Despair or Darkness, you are locked into either that or Doom. Essentially, you can only move, as you move down the chart, you can only move left or right 1 space per round. So, as we're in Doom here, we would move and we could choose any 3. If you choose, for example, the Darkness ability, you'd go to Darkness, and you can now only choose Doom. As you move on to Doom, you could then go back and choose either one of the 2. So there's a lot of optionality to it, sort of sculpting how you're going to choose your access to your abilities is pretty cool, but it is a little bit of bookkeeping, and I'm not sure I'm entirely here for it. It kind of feels like they've come up with this combat doctrine style mechanic, and then they're extrapolating to the edges of their design space, with every different faction having a slightly different version of combat doctrines. And this is kind of one of the most complex that we've we've seen so far. So I don't know. It is what it is. A lot of these will affect things in Doom or in Dread Range, excuse me. For example, the turn 1 ability, which probably will effectively never matter, is a leadership and combat attrition penalty for enemies in Dread Range. We can move that to the Despair, which reduces aura abilities on enemy units within Dread Range. Encroaching Doom increases the size of your Dread Range, which only will affect your other abilities, since it itself doesn't give you any abilities. This one's pretty interesting. Geist Storm. If you are in Dread Range, so within 12 inches of a Chaos Knight, you can only target the closest eligible Chaos Knight or closest eligible target. So that's pretty cool. As soon as you catch somebody within 12, then they basically have to shoot you. So if you put your tankiest big knight up there, they're going to have to be dealing with you. And one thing that we'll see as kind of a theme over the course of this codex, and especially exemplified by this Dread Range ability, is that a lot of the Codex is predicated on sort of offensive auras and playing very offensively. So trying to move up the table and get your opponent inside the ranges for these abilities to then muck up their turn. And this Geist Storm on Battle Round 2 is a pretty good example of that. As we move on, Empiric Fugue messes with your opponent's actions and can potentially end their actions. That's very matchup specific, I would imagine. Mortal Terror even more affects leadership or failed morale checks. And then Pall of Darkness is +1 to hit from more than 12 inches away, so almost outside of dread range. That one's probably that one's pretty good. You probably, I think generally speaking, these darkness abilities are probably the strongest section. Paralyzing Insanity over here, Battle Round 4. Removing gaining objective secured, or excuse me, losing objective secured while enemies are within dread range of you. We have more leadership manipulation effects over here, and then -1 to hit in melee on Battle Round 4. Not the most useful time to get -1 to hit in melee, but it is pretty useful since in Battle Round 4 there's usually everything's mixing it up. And then you have again another combat attrition modifier, very similar to Battle Round 1 once you're on Round 5. So we kind of there's a lot of leadership affecting things in this Codex, and I'm sure you can, especially potentially, you could probably build for some leadership impacting lists, but with so many armies being mostly immune to leadership effects, it's kind of awkward. So generally speaking, I think you want the raw combat buffs, which is where the darkness tree gives you, the darkness path, I guess. But these other ones are an option if you're playing against the Horde army or a low leadership army in there anyway. So that's the big faction ability, and there are some sub-factions that are going to be utilizing that in specific. So we'll go ahead and pop back to our sub-factions over here. We just talked about Herpatrax. So mostly about kind of resilience. Obviously, adding to wounds characteristic and ignoring modifiers means that you can kind of plow through whatever, as well as a relic that's -1 to be hit in melee. That's pretty okay. House Lucaris gives you a Master Artisan style reroll, or I guess like a Tau Sept style reroll. You reroll 1 hit or wound roll. So not 1 hit and wound roll, although that does appear later on in this Codex, which is pretty wild. You have a pretty cool stratagem that bombs stuff that you move over. Obviously, Knights, the Titanic Walker rule remains, so you can move over non-vehicle monster enemy units while you're performing normal moves, advances and falls back and stuff like that. And with the Trample Them stratagem, you can do mortal wounds when you move over people, which is pretty fun. Their Warlord trait is Fight First, which is pretty good for a Knight that typically eats a lot of charges before it goes down, but not the most exciting thing in the world. And then the Serpent Strike Core is another one of these abilities that can supercharge a weapon. So if you're building for a Knight that takes a single powerful weapon, especially to utilize your... I guess in this case, you wouldn't be able to use your demonic surge ability to add because this is an Iconoclast household. But you do get a bonus to your Meltagun, a Meltagun, essentially. So it's basically a relic. It's probably a relic thermal cannon, to be fair. But you could also use it on the War Dog melta weapons as well. Gives you +1 strength, +2 damage. So at minimum range, you could be D6 +4 on a lot of those melta weapons, which is an absolutely phenomenal amount of damage. House Chimere gives you a bonus against half-strength enemy units. Pretty much only good against larger, like armies with larger numbers of models, because a lot of times if you're playing against enemies with 3 or 5 models per unit, you're just gonna kill them instead of getting them below half strength. So don't know if I absolutely love that sub-faction ability. The strat is almost exactly a Hammer of Wrath, with this benefit that on a wound roll of 6, you deal automatic 2 mortal wounds. You roll 4d6 per for the model rolling, so it's not per unit model in combat. 6d6 if you're Titanic, and if you beat their toughness, they take a mortal wound. So That's all right, I guess. It's good if you... It's nice that... I mean, it's good if you're playing against a phase-capped enemy, so something like a Catan or a Phoenix Lord. Having access to these stratagems is pretty good. And we do see that it does have this 2 CP increased cost if we target the Titanic units with it. So that's going to be pretty common across the entirety of the Codex. One thing that they're really trying to push is sort of more heavy War Dog play, and so a lot of the new mechanics and new stratagems are focused on those War Dogs. So, and that's reinforced by having 1 CP stratagems to target them. The Warlord trait is a Dread Test ability. So a Dread Test is the other unique mechanic for the faction. It is effectively an old school leadership chest. So you roll 2d6, you try to get below your leadership value. So the higher your leadership value is, the smaller chance there is of rolling above it, so the better chance you are at passing the test. This means that you can try to build lists that are focused on these morale penalties to make those dread tests easier to fail. I don't know how effective it's going to be because, again, you know, there are some... The leadership value in 40k is wildly inconsistent between armies. You know, we have Custodies over here at 11 versus an army that might have 4 or 5. What's nice about the Dread Test is that it's not a morale test, so if you have something, you know, like a Fearless ability that makes you immune to morale tests, you will still potentially fail it. So if you have low leadership that is then made fearless by another ability, like Synapse or like a Commissar killing your Guardsmen, those will still be affected by Dread Tests. So there are some upsides depending on the particular matchup that you're in. Their Relic gives you a 5+ invulnerable save against melee. Ion Shields, obviously, it has been retained as a 5+ invulnerable save against ranged attacks only. So invulnerable saves are very difficult to source in the faction against melee attacks. So getting a 5+ invuln against melee attacks is pretty good. This also reflects you mortal wounds on saving throws of 6 in melee, which is that's all right, I guess. That's fine. So now we're moving over to the Infernal Houses. So these get access to the Demonic Surge ability that we just talked about. You can take damage in order to buff yourself with +3 movement, +1 to wound on a ranged weapon, or the Transhuman effect. And yeah, that's what you do. So over here, this one, I think Vextrix is probably my favorite household so far. And that is because we do have the return of old school Master Artisans, but importantly, only shooting. So you can reroll 1 hit roll and 1 rune roll when resolving ranged attacks. But remember that we are talking about knights here, which means that they can essentially always operate normally. They can, outside of War Dogs, which, if I remember correctly, have a stratagem for it, they can fall back, shoot, and charge just fine. So, they're always going to be shooting. You're going to get this, you know, full 5 battle rounds on all of your models, and that is an absolutely phenomenal amount of rerolls that you have access to. Their interception array is ignore hit roll and ballistic skill modifiers when making a ranged attack. It's glorious. You can shoot aircraft with that. You can shoot through Venom Throw Auras. You can even just be shooting into dense cover and ignoring all of that for 1 CP. And on top of that, you get that reroll. This faction is so efficient at shooting. It's going to be good. Their Warlord trait gives you +1 wound if you're a War Dog, +2 wounds if you're Titanic. And at the start of your command phase, you regen D3 lost wounds. Now, that isn't the most exciting thing. You know, for a knight with a boatload of attacks, it's all right, I guess, right? You're probably going to be taking 1 or 2 rounds of shooting before you go down, so you'll get 1 or 2 triggers out of this. But remember that this is in a demonic household, so you're going to be eating damage every turn from surges. And this, you can surge, and then at the start of your next turn, before you surge again, you'll repair, hopefully, you'll repair the damage from the previous surge. So you can kind of surge for free with this Warlord trait, which is why I kind of like it. The Heretic Power Core... I don't know if I read the name of the relic before, but that's that's a silly name. Gives you +2 move and +1 damage for your attacks if you're not using a sweep characteristic. Kind of interesting that your faction's all about shooting. Everything's about shooting, except for your power core. But I don't know. +1 damage is nice. Whether or not you would just take a relic weapon, I don't know. Probably, but It's good if you've got like the one melee guy in the army, you can give him the buff for +2 movement. Because the knights, another little spoiler here before we get to datasheets, the knights did get a little bit slower. They went to 10-inch move instead of 12, which is a little sad, but I think it's probably okay. There are a lot of things that allow you to advance and do stuff, so it's probably fine. Moving to House Comentus, you get to reroll your D3 when you're determining your demonic surge, and you can, when you take D3 mortal wounds, you get 2 demonic surges. So more efficient demonic surges in general. In addition, you can, if you strategic reserve your war dogs, you can bring them out on strategic reserve on the top of 1. It's 1 unit, which means you could be bringing up to 3 war dogs, I believe, which will then vehicle squadron when they deploy. So that's pretty spicy. And there are ways, importantly, to return war dogs back into strategic reserve, which would basically only matter if you strategic reserve them turn 1, and then you use the reserve turn 2 to count it as turn 3 in order to come into your opponent's deployment zone. But if you do that convoluted web of interactions, you can be encircling your war dogs in your opponent's deployment zone pretty early, which is pretty cool. Their warlord trait lets you once per game supercharge one of your guns, so it's very similar to the demonic surge. This one gives you full rerolls to hit and wound and +1 damage, but remember, it's only once per game. Probably good on a pretty high rate of fire weapon, so like a Gatling cannon or the new Volkite cannon from the Abominant. Those are both high volume attacks, and that is where this warlord trait is going to be very good. I think this is a pretty cool warlord trait. The relic is +1 AP for the bearer against one thing within 18 inches. So you pick a unit, you get +1 AP against them with your ranged attacks for that round. So, man, these demonic households, I think the ability for Iconoclast, especially for melee, is pretty strong. +1 AP, +1, especially in an armor, or an environment of Armor of Contempt. +1 AP is a pretty big deal. And +1 attack as well. And like we said, you can stack a bunch of extra attack bonuses on top of that. But these demonic household subfaction abilities are pretty freaking wild. I like Comentus and I like Vextrix so far. And we can move on to the last one if it will let me. House Corvax. This one lets you double up once per game on your Harbinger ability. You can pick a previous Harbinger ability, and you just get it. It also works, interestingly, if your every unit doesn't have Chaos Knights. So if you only have one detachment of House Corvax Knights, you will, for one turn, get a Harbinger ability from the current or previous battle round. So, all right, that's fine. This gives you the ability to move through terrain. So you get flip belts, either on 2 war dogs or 1 Titanic unit. And you can walk through models and terrain without penalty. That's fucking awesome. One of the big downsides of an all-vehicle army is sometimes you just get messed up by terrain, and if that is a problem for you, you can play House Corvax to get around it. The Warlord trait extends your aura and dreaded abilities, and the Relic gives you it's a once per round. Ignore an attack. It's once your save is failed, you reduce the damage to 0. It's optional. It's not like a Helix Adapt where it's the first one, so your opponent can't blow it with a 1 damage attack and then hit you with their big stuff. If they shoot you with a railgun, you're like, I'm only going to take the mortal wound, sir. I'm not going to take the 9 damage from the railgun. Get out of here. That's friggin' awesome. It burns out if on a failed leadership check. So if you take a leadership check every time you use it, and I believe most of the big knights are leadership 9. If you fail, so if you roll in this case equal to or higher, so a 9+ on 2d6, it will burn out and never get used again. If you continue to roll below that, you can use it again once per battle round only, but continue to go through the rest of the game. And that can be a lot of damage that you save, especially if your opponent is taking really heavy anti-tank weapons against you. Although, to be fair, with the number of transhuman effects that you have access to in this faction, like we just talked about, one of the demonic surges is just transhuman, full stop, and you can put that on everything in your demonic surged army, then your demonic household iron army, then you or infernal, excuse me, then you know, those big, heavy anti-tank weapons are already going to be struggling a little bit if they don't have any rerolls. These are the Dread households. So you can, if you want to use a custom household, you don't want to use any of the ones over there, you can use these ones. So you pick one. It's not a pick two for a custom household, but all of the abilities are pretty freaking cool. One of them copies the Iconoclast households. So you, I don't believe, get an Iconoclast ability. Oh, they do. Just kidding. So, this is just for a custom household, unfortunately, though, because it says that you can't select it for Dreadblades. So there you go. Not really worth talking about. That's a fluff include, because it doesn't do anything. So there you go. But when you pick a Dreadblade, you can pick one of these abilities to give it to them, or when you build a custom household, you can pick one of these abilities to give them to give to you. It does replace all of the other effects from your household, so you won't get like a Warlord trait and a relic and stuff like that. So it is a little bit different, but some of the abilities are really good. Frenzied Invaders is exploding sixes in melee, solid. Learned Idolaters is AP1 is AP0, so ignore AP1. Loping Predators allow you to fall back. Oh, no, it just allows you to advance and counter stationary, so you can advance and shoot throughout your shooting phase. You can't advance and charge unless you have another ability, which there are some, but you advance and shoot without penalty. Precision Cruelty? Sure. Okay, G-dub. Whatever. Gives you rending on... it's a Blade Artist effect, so wound rolls of 6 gives you +1 AP. It also gives you +1 damage on your ranged attacks. That one's pretty solid. Prideful Wrath, you double wounds when you're determining what your characteristics are, so that's for when you bracket. And then Worthy Offerings. I really like this one, actually. I think this one's kind of sick. Each time you make an attack against a monster, vehicle, or character, you get +1 to hit, and if you kill a monster, vehicle, or character with that knight, if you have a favored ability, it automatically favors. It doesn't matter how many models you've killed. You don't have to reach your tally count. Your offering has been accepted, and your favored ability unlocks immediately. That's pretty cool. And if there... I would like more ways to get that ability in there, but it does mean that you can really lean into the favorite abilities in your army, and you can take as many as possible. Because if you get a situation where your opponent has a lot of monsters and vehicles, and we are, remember, in a metagame where Tyranids just came out and are playing many, many monsters, suddenly your entire army is looking pretty good for maxing out its favorite abilities. So that's cute. Although whether or not it's worth losing the other effects that your other sub-factions have, I don't know, because those other sub-factions are pretty solid. Anyway. Whoa, let's move on, chat. This is pretty good stuff. What are people thinking so far? Loving the strat and relic for Corvax. Yeah, for sure. The strat is, I think, the biggest thing for Corvax, to be honest. The relic is very cool. I really love it. And it really makes your opponent reconsider how they deal with your big knights. But the strat is, like, game-changing, right? Because you can imagine you have a big Nova L, right? Classic Nova L, a big thing. You can literally hide your knights behind it and then move through it in your movement phase, or at least one knight. You can do it one knight. You can also do it in your charge phase if your opponent's trying to get cheeky and body block you between like a models and a ruin, so you can't place on the models and the ruins in your way. Then you pop the strat for 2 CP and you just walk through the building fucking punch the crap out of them. That's a big deal. That's a big old deal. There's a Dread test build out there with Korvax? I kind of hope so. I do, I would like to see Dread tests be good, but to be honest, like, I'm envisioning you play against Custodes and your, like, gimmick does nothing because they're all leadership of 100 million. Oof. Big oof. All right, let's move on. I think we have up next talking about some stratagems. Do we want to talk about stratagems or do we want to talk about... Oh, there's some additional sub-faction abilities here I don't know if I've talked about. Yeah, you have one for custom house to unlock the Infernal Households. Dark Forging, plus 4 inches to range weapons, plus 1 strength and damage to heavy stubbers. Nice. This heavy stubbers, by the way, did go up to strength 5 in this codex. So that's kind of nice. You get some pretty solid heavy stubber shooting going on. And then you would know Lookout Sir with your heavy stubbers, which are then strength 6, 2 damage. All right. Geists of Ruin, more than 18 inches away, you get cover. That used to be 24. I'm glad it changed. That was like sort of low key playable. Hellforged Construction gives you Ramshackle, strength 7 or less, -1 damage. Wow, that's all right. Seems good. Biomechanical Fusion, you gain Demonic Surge, and you ignore Demonic Surge mortal wounds on a 4+. All right, fair enough. Unhallowed Inscriptions gives you 5+, ignore mortal wounds, and +1 to deny the witch. Very nice. And Warp Vision, you ignore cover. And that is... Oh, light cover, excuse me. Not heavy or dense. That's unfortunate. Feels like you could just give him ignore cover, right? I don't know. I guess not. I guess not. People want to see data sheets? All right, well, we'll go to data sheets, everybody. Be prepared to see a lot of similar statistics to the previous codex. Let's get into data sheets. Here we go. So we have the War Dogs. A couple things went up AP, basically, is what I've been noticing. The Stubbers got the updated Stubber treatment. So these ones are strength 5, 4 shots instead of 3 shots, strength 4. Okay, sure. The War Dog, to my knowledge, I think got a little slower, and that was the only base profile change that happened to them. They went from 14 inches movement down to 12 inches, but otherwise remained unchanged, but their weapons got upgraded a little bit. We can see the autocannon got an extra pip of AP. All right. I don't know about that. They have their Meltagun baked in now, it looks like. And then they can replace it with the heavy stubber, and I believe that there's no additional points cost for any of these things. Yeah, it's just when you upgrade to the Havoc launchers. Oh no, the Demon Breath Meltagun is plus 5 points. Okay. So the Meltagun is baked in, and you can save 5 points by upgrading it to the stubber. So we're looking at like 160 points, 155 if you take the stubber. All right. Well, that's something, I guess. The Stalker is the punchy and shooty guy. It gets the Chain Cannon, which is strength 6 AP2, which is actually a really good profile. I'm going to be honest, chat. The strength 6 AP2 I've been telling people is like, at least if you're talking about playing against Tyranids, which a lot of times you should be, this faction actually might be pretty okay against Tyranids because there is a lot of mortal wound ignoring across the faction. There's a lot of ignore penalties to hit across the faction as well, and there's a lot of hyper powerful ranged attacks. So if you can go first with this faction, we'll say you have to go first. There are a lot of ways to ignore penalties to hit, and you shoot at their harpies, and you just try as hard as you can to kill all their harpies immediately, and then we try to play the attrition game with these little strength 6 weapons, because Tyranids have an appreciable number of damage reduction effects. So, especially if you shoot Tyranid warriors, they can -1 damage you for 1 CP. if you're strength 6 and they're playing against High Fleet Leviathan, you're going to be wounding them on 4s regardless of their effects, which is good. But you're not low enough strength. Strength 5, if their encephalic diffusion is active, gets reduced to strength 4, and you wound their T8 stuff on 6s. But strength 6 wounds everything on 5s all the time, and 4s at the worst. So you're going to be putting everything up on their invulnerable save with a high volume, wounding on 5s. I think that's the profile you need to be pushing as hard as you can if you can. The Havoc multi-launcher is an upgrade, and it is indirect fire, but it's AP 0, so it's negative. I guess if it shoots indirect, it's like negative 1 AP because it improves their armor save by 1. It's a little sad. But they are D3 plus 3 damage in melee, strength 12. That's okay, I guess. If you're Iconoclast, they're plus 1 attack, 5 attacks. All right, that's something. The Carnivore is in here with a little Reaper Chain Talon. That one doesn't look like it's changed at all, but they are 5 base attacks, so they can go to 6 in Iconoclast households. And they are base 2+ weapon skill. Does the Executioner have a ballistic skill bonus? No. Okay, well, that's sad. So we do get 2+ weapon skill, I guess because it has the 2 weapons. And it either hits with the D3 plus 3 or probably the sweep. I don't know if you would ever swing the Chain Talon's strike attack. So you'd either be 10 attacks, strength 6 AP 3, or 5 attacks, D3 plus 3, strength 12. Now, are the melee guys any cheaper than the shooty guys is what I don't know. They are. The Carnivore is 140. Which isn't, it's not too bad for what you're getting. They're a little squishy though. So obviously the ion shields have been are unchanged. So it's a 5+ invulnerable save to ranged attacks. And one thing that I will put out there, chat, and one thing that I know there's going to be a little bit of wailing in there. 14-inch move too. Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call out. And I think generally it looks like, I think I'd have to compared to the existing data sheets, but I think that they don't bracket quite as badly as they did. Yeah, they used to bracket 14, 10, 7, and now they bracket 12, 10, 8. So, I mean, they don't start quite as high, but they only lose 2 inches of movement for each bracket, not 3 or 4. So their bracket isn't quite as impactful, especially this guy's, he's still 10-inch move on his bottom profile, which is probably fine once he's bracketed. But one thing that I will steal you for, chat, is, to my knowledge, there is no rotate ion shields in this codex. Which is a little scary. There are ways to get 4+ invulnerable saves otherwise, and there are a lot of other defensive effects. As we saw, one of the Harbinger abilities is -1 to be hit outside of 12 inches, or -1 to be hit in melee, and if you can, there are like 12 different ways to roll back Harbinger effects, which means you can be having that -1 to hit multiple turns in a row. And between that and the transhuman abilities that you have, between either the the demonic surge or the some of the favored abilities have a transhuman effect, then your big anti-tank stuff is not really is gonna be bouncing a little bit more often. So that's something, I guess. It's a little bit less useful for War Dogs because you don't necessarily want to be taking all those mortal wounds on the War Dogs because they only have 12 wounds to start with. So if you're taking D3 mortal wounds to buff your demonic surge, they're going to run out of wounds real quick. But especially since you can't take the D3 mortals to hypercharge their damage on their gun, because previously you used to be able to do that with the demonic surge, so they would get +1 wound, +1 damage on one weapon on these guys, and they would supercharge one of the little guns, and that would be pretty good, especially for Moiraxes. That said, we don't know how Moiraxes are, gonna slot into this because we'll have to wait for an IAC update, which is not forthcoming at all. There are still Tyranid and Eldari datasheets that are unplayable, and right now, which is unfortunate. The Brigand is all shooting all the time. Comes with an Adventure Chain Cannon and a Demon Breath Spear, which is the Thermal Lance. Kind of like this guy, actually. It's 2 shots now instead of D3 Blast, which is, I guess, in general a downgrade, but you can shoot it into melee. But Strength 9 AP 4 D6 plus 2 if you're within 15 is pretty solid. Plus, I talked about how much I like the Avenger Chain Cannon profile. So it feels like that one is the that's the winner in my book. How much is a Brigand? The Brigand is 155. So on par with the Executioner. And then, yeah, we have the Huntsman. So Huntsman is just a Warglaive, almost exactly. So, yeah, it has the Spear, Melt-A-Gun. It is nice that the Spear went up to Strength 9, but it was actually kind of nice when the War Dog, like, it ran up to you. I think the Lance, the Spear went to, it went from Assault to Heavy. Ooh, that's awkward, actually. Because he used to be able to, if you full tilted the little guy, he would advance and charge? That's sad. That's too bad. But now you can only move and shoot the Spear. But it means that you can't, like, fast roll all 3 of your Melt-A-Gun weapons together. When you would, like, advance right up to somebody and then you would fire all 3 weapons. So the Carapace Melt-A-Gun plus the Spear Melt-A-Gun. Now you have to slow roll them because they're different strength value. Poops. But it is whatever. There is a rotate. Did I just miss it? Maybe I just missed it. So there, yeah, okay, yeah. So there is one. Yeah, you're right, chat. There is one, but it's only versus ranged attacks. Is the difference? All right. Don't let me. All right. Mea culpa. It's a little bit different because it only works ranged attacks. Which is only really relevant for stuff that has relics or Mageras. But it is still a pretty big deal. I did put that in my notes, and then I forgot about it. All right. Those are the little guys. Let's talk about the big guys. So we have Desecrator. This is Chainsword, big gun dude. He's got Laser Destructor. There's a pretty good relic for the Laser Destructor, which I don't totally dislike. And all of them give an aura ability to War Dogs now. So we have the Desecrator gives reroll hit rolls of 1 for ranged attacks, which is pretty okay. And then we have the Rampager gives reroll hit rolls of 1 for melee attacks. This is double melee man. He does hit on 2s with his melee attacks, which is pretty good. The other guy is a 3/3, I assume. Oh no, they both hit on 2s. Just kidding. All right, so we got +1 weapon skill on these guys, and he is up to a 12-inch movement, so he's not quite he's not too much slower than the other ones. Yeah, the other ones did go down to 10-inch movement on their top profile, but now we're at 12 for the Rampager. He's got big strength 14, AP 4, 6 damage on the chainsword, or he swings for 15 attacks, 2 damage. And again, 5 base attacks, but we can go up to 6 if we take Iconoclast and then stack other stuff on top of that. And then the big claw is 2 swings, so it sweeps a little bit less good. So again, the Titanic feet no longer split attacks, but all of the weapons do. So the claw splits to 2 attack rolls at 3 damage. Instead of just 2 damage like the chainsword does at strength 10 AP 2, and then it also swings for 8 flat damage AP 3. It's a little bit awkward AP values, although I think they've kind of built Iconoclast into this, so like assuming that the claw is going to be AP 4 on its top, on the 8 damage swing, and then the chainsword would be AP 5. It is always annoying having overlapping melee weapons like that, though. Yeah, big attack's not -1 to hit. That is pretty good. I don't believe that there is a full tilt strat, but there is a favor for it, I believe, to advance and charge. Yeah. That gives you, it's the Slanesh favor that gives you access to the Slanesh strat, which is extra attacks versus large units. We'll talk about all that later. We got Tyrants now, so the big boy. Staying at 4+ weapon skill, unfortunately. That's too bad. We have a Brimstone Volcano Lance, D3 shots, blast, strength 16, AP 5, D6 plus 8 damage. Okay, calm down. D6 plus 8. All right. These guys 2+ armor save as well. The other knights being a 3+, but 2+ base is pretty solid. The Ectoplasma Decimator, we saw the profile here spoiled. It's basically previous, but +1 strength, +1 damage on all of its weapons. Takes 2 mortal wounds on a hit roll of 1, unfortunately, at the end. Geist Strike Missile is literally just a Shieldbreaker missile. You can shoot 1 at a time, once per game, and it ignores invulnerable saves. Strength 10, AP 4, D6 damage. It's fine. Yeah. So these guys really suck in melee now. Hitting on 4s, no multiplicative attacks. So 4 base attacks, strength 8, AP 2, 2 damage. You're basically Garbo in melee. Yikes. That's unfortunate. But they will be shooting, and they can fall back, shoot, and charge just as normal. Which is pretty good. We do have their auto explode for 2d6 inches d6, and I will spoil here a little bit that the auto explode strat happens automatically now, and gives you a 50% chance to activate the expanded aura, which means your auto exploding, your explode on death stuff is going to be a lot better, and especially with how aggressive this Codex is supposed to be played, getting up in your opponent's face is going to be pretty constant. There's only one Tyrant class. Yeah, that's correct. And then we have the Abominant, the big one everyone's been excited for. So he's got that base, the base Chaos Knight profile, move 10, 3+3+, 24 wounds. He's only 3 base attacks, which is unfortunate, instead of 4, and a 3+ save. He has a Bale Mace, so it's D3 additional attacks, it's strength 8, AP 2, 2 damage, so kind of a feat attack. It is basically a feat attack, but it gets D3 additional with it. And then the Electro Scourge is AP2, 3 damage, make 3 attacks each. So it's 9 attacks with the Electro Scourge, so 3 damage, plus D3 with the Mace. The Volkite Combustor, pretty cool weapon. 6 shots, strength 10. It is AP1, which is interesting for a Volkite weapon specifically, because those are usually AP0. And on an unmodified wound roll of 6, it inflicts 3 mortal wounds in addition to any normal damage. So, little bit of a low shot profile, but if you can source rerolls on that guy, so there's that relic to full reroll once per game, you can try to fish for those wound rolls of 6, and you literally just kill something with mortal wounds, which is pretty solid. In addition, you get 2 casts, 1 deny, and there are ways to buff that as well with the psychic effects. If you are a Coronate Abominant, you can also source +1 attack. So, like, you can imagine a Coronate Iconoclast is going up to 5 attacks. So it's attacking 15 times with the 3 damage Electro Scourge. So the Mr. Tentacle Hand is actually hitting pretty hard at AP3 once he gets to Iconoclast. And you can push that even farther if you want to as well. What are the stats on the Big Flamer? I don't know if we have a Big Flamer. I think the Big Flamer is Valiant only, and Chaos Knights don't have a Valiant equivalent. I imagine that's what you're asking about. Screw the D6 plus 8 damage, yeah. I mean, I think we had a discussion in the comment section a little bit previously, but I was talking about how I think it was Rupture Cannons or something, low volume attack stacked up against the high volume that can access like rerolls and stuff like that. And the low volume, high damage was like, you know, on average, dramatically less good than higher volume attacks. But D6 plus 8 is a pretty phenomenal damage profile. So if you get at least one of those through, there is a coin flip chance you just kill an 8-wound vehicle. Which is pretty solid, especially since you can sorcery rolls to damage roll and stuff like that. Tyrant has 4 missiles. Yeah, but the wording of the Tyrant is that you can only fire 1 at a time, right? So each missile, once per game, you can fire 1. I believe it's, that's correct, right? Yeah. When it's selected to, you can only make attacks with 1 Guy Strike missile. Yeah. So I think the way I worded it previously was maybe a little bit confusing. Every turn, you can shoot 1 Guy Strike missile up to the number of Guy Strike missiles you have. So if you have 4, you can do that 4 turns. Although I think, to be honest, you might just take the two autocannons. 2 one-shot strength 10 guns is probably not as good as mass desecrator shots. Oh, the alternate loadout on the Tyrant? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you get the Dark Flame Cannon. Okay. So there is a... Yeah, sorry, I missed that chat. You're right. There is an alternate loadout, a Valiant loadout. I think we saw this spoiled in the Warhammer Community article, right? So it's 3d6, strength 7, AP 2, 2 damage. 18-inch range. It is heavy, so you can't advance and shoot it, unfortunately. And the... what is the name of their harpoon? Warp Shock Harpoon. The Warp Shock Harpoon hits for strength 16, AP 6, 10 damage. No ignoring invulnerable saves, importantly. You can get +1 to hit against monsters or vehicles, so hits on 2s. And you deal 3 mortal wounds in addition to normal damage. So it's basically a railgun, right? It's like almost exactly a railgun. Interesting. Can you still take double chain cannon? That's a good question. I'm not sure. I didn't delve too deep into the loadouts. I don't know if we have... Was that a despoiler? Do I have a despoiler? Oh, I do. Yeah, here it is. So it comes with Reaper Chainsword, Warp Strike Claw. You can replace Reaper Chainsword with Gatling Cannon, and you can replace Warp Strike Claw with Gatling Cannon. Yeah, you get double Chainsword guy. Absolutely. So this guy, we didn't talk about this guy at all, actually. We just skipped right through him. The Despoilers give War Dog's Heroic Intervention, which is actually, I think, the coolest of the aura abilities that we get. Because heroically intervening, especially while on objectives, is super duper powerful. And especially with how big the base of War Dog is, your opponent basically has to kill those things in order to take the objective away from you, since they are objective secured and count as 5 models, remember. And... especially, for example, if the Despoiler is, anywhere near that objective or is touching the objective. You have 15 models with objective secured on it, and if they move to contest, then you get to intervene them. So they have to actually come in and kill your War Dogs. To be fair, not the hardest thing in the world, but it is still pretty cool. So I really like that aura, and especially since all of these auras are 9 inches, not just like the normal 6. Especially with how centralized and condensed the objectives are in GT Nachmund, you will affect an appreciable amount of the table with that aura, which is pretty good. This guy gets +1 attack if he has 2 melee weapons. And yeah, he's base 4 attack, so he could go to 5 with 2 melee weapons. But he's basically just a bad rampager at that point. Although if you want the Heroic Intervention aura ability, then that's what you want. That's what you get. Good stuff. All right. Should we go back to strats, chat? Oh, yeah. We'll take a look at points cost here real quick for these guys. So Despoiler is if you get 2 Demon Breath Thermals, 2 Battle Cannons, or 2 Gatling Cannons, you're plus 20 points. So yeah, he spikes in cost real quick. Hot damn. Holy crap. If you take double Gatling Cannons, you go to 600 points. Is that right? You go to 4... Not quite, right? 495... 515. You get a 515 points. Jesus. Okay. All right. The other ones are pretty reasonably costed, 400 points apiece. What are they at right now? We're at 405 for a Desecrator. Rampager 415. So a slight cut on the other ones, on the other knight varieties. But you are going to be spending on favors, I imagine. Yeah. Yeah, so the way the favors work in actuality is that every favor, one thing that was a little bit unclear in the Warhammer community article, every favor is available for every knight, but they have different points cost depending on the kind of knight you put it on. Which is pretty good. So I'm glad there's not like a million bajillion favors, but there are still a lot. There's 3 for each Chaotic Allegiance and 3 for Undivided, which is some kind of Bellicor themed stuff. Are there any Chaos Knight specific secondaries? There are, yes. Should we talk about secondaries later? Just recently popped 5 Imperial Guard tanks with 2 Rupture Cannons. Hopefully not in one turn. I don't know how you do that. Let's talk about some secondaries. So we have our chapter approved rules here. The secondaries actually seem pretty okay. I like this one. So purge the enemy gives you a fitting challenge. Essentially, it's a reverse to the last. You pick your opponent, or your opponent tallies their most expensive units, and you get points for killing them quickly. Unlike to the last, where you get points for having them alive at the end of the game, you get points depending on how quickly you kill them. This is pretty good because a lot of times if a person is playing very expensive units, they are typically going to be trying to play those units aggressively unless they're building for to the last. This one doesn't play well with to the last. So if your opponent is building has a to the last build, then you probably don't want to take it. But if they have units that are trying, like melee only units that are very expensive, you can take this one because those units are going to be forced to come and fight you, and then you get the chance to kill them. So I really like this secondary. You get 6 points for each one you kill on turn 1. And then from there, battle round 2, 3 is probably when you're actually killing them, which means that there's a non-zero chance that you're scoring 12 to, 10 to 12 at least off this one. Assuming that you can kill all of your opponent's most expensive units, which you probably can. Yeah, the points reduction is unfortunate. If you end up not doing it, you're going to be scoring not too many points. But if you can score, if you can kill 2 on battle round 5, for example, and then get the last one in battle round, or battle round 2, excuse me, to get 5 points, and then get the last one in battle round 2, then you're kind of off to the races. You're getting 12 points on it. It's really specific to your opponent, though. No Mercy, No Respite gives you Path of Destruction, which is, I believe, the one that was printed in GT Nachmund. You get 1 victory point if you destroy an enemy while you're with a unit that is in your deployment zone. You destroy. You get 1 point if you kill an enemy with a unit 3 inches from either player's deployment zone, so center of the table, excuse me, and then you get 1 point if you destroy something that's within your opponent's deployment zone, up to 3. So you're incentivized to spread your army out, and again, this Codex is supposed to be playing pretty aggressively, so they're trying to incentivize you to get across the table. I don't know if you're going to kill while you're wholly within your opponent's deployment zone on turn 1. You can probably get these relatively easily, especially if they have chaff units, but it's like dictating your target priority, and I don't know if that's particularly great. If you can do this one with like War Dogs maybe on turn 2, then it's fine. But it feels a little bit. It feels like you're maybe pushing for a 12-pointer or something on a good day, which seems a little bit tough. Ruthless Tyranny is this one. Yeah, this one I think is definitely the solid one. It is Battlefield Supremacy, so it's fighting directly with Stranglehold, although it's better. It's almost strictly better than Stranglehold, so you're not that worried about it. I think it actually literally is strictly better than Stranglehold. There are going to be situations where like maybe you would consider an engage on all fronts, but probably not, honestly. You get 2 victory points if your Chaos Knights hold half or more of the objective markers on the battlefield. So it's Stranglehold, but you don't have to hold more than your opponent. That gets you 2 points already. If half or more, so again, the same number, objective markers are within dread range of your Chaos Knights, which means within 12 inches or expanded if you have things that expand your dread range, then you get an additional point. So immediately, if there are 5 objectives, for example, and you take 3 of them, it's immediately Stranglehold because you're already projecting dread range on those objectives and you're holding them. So you scored 3. Boom. In addition, if you hold every objective marker, or excuse me, if every objective marker is in dread range, you get an additional victory point. Probably a little bit tougher, but again, the dread range is pretty wide. It's a 12-inch bubble. So, and it has to only hit the 40 millimeter marker in the center of the objective zone. And it's within, not wholly within. Yeah, so you have a lot of leeway when you're scoring it. So that's probably the one that you're taking, right? It's strictly better unless you use Forge World Knights. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put too much stock into the Forge World stuff until we get an Imperial Armor Compendium update, because it's kind of a mess. Last one, Storm of Darkness. This is a kind of a funky one. It gives you an action you can do at the end of the morale phase. So you start at end of your turn. It finishes at the end of your psychic phase. So you move to the objective, perform the action at the start of your turn, perform it through your next movement phase, and then also your psychic phase. So if you're an abominant you can't cast, then it's completed. If you complete it, it's kind of a strategic scan. You do it once for each objective marker. You get 3 points at the end of the game if the objective marker is cursed, right? Yeah. And then the objective marker gets a 6-inch aura of -1 leadership, which is very cute. So if you're trying to do like a dread, the dread test build, this secondary kind of helps you. And I really like these secondaries that have additional mechanical impacts on the game on top of just scoring you victory points. That said, the objective marker that you're performing the action on can't be contested by enemies, which means you can oftentimes only score like 1, 2 objectives maybe, and then at that point your opponent's going to be on you. Although I guess you do have the chance to kill them, to kill the enemy unit before you start to perform the action. So it's not quite as cut and dry as that, but it does seem to be like it's going to be a little bit tough, especially if you're doing it with your faster units like your War Dogs and stuff. Your opponent might just be able to kill that model. Although, to be fair, being able to get if you're playing with a center objective, you get a big knight to the center. If that knight can clear the middle objective, they can start to perform the action. And if they're not an abominant, then they don't care about. They just give up a movement phase the next turn. But giving up a whole movement phase for a knight is a pretty big deal. So this one's. It's just so weird. It's just a strange one. What a weirdo. The strange for secondaries in the Codex is you're trying to find a third one other than To the Last and Stranglehold. So, I mean, I think you're probably just going to take Ruthless Tyranny, right? Because it's better. It's strictly better than Stranglehold. You could switch for Stranglehold and try to take a different one. But to be honest, I mean, maybe that's the play. But I think most of the time your secondaries are going to be contingent on your opponent's army rather than your own. Although giving knights access to a very good, or I don't know if I'd say very good, but a good Shadow Op secondary is a pretty big deal. This feels to me like a 9er. Like, it doesn't feel to me like you're going to score more than 3 objectives with this action. Especially since you probably don't have that many models in a Chaos Knights army. You know, on a good day, you have 6, right? If you have, like, if you're taking War Dogs and the Big Knights. And so, giving up a movement phase for 1/6 of your army every turn while you're losing models feels a little bit awkward. But this does open up an entire new category of secondaries for Chaos Knights. And the other thing that we shouldn't keep in, we should remember is that they have abominants now. So Warpcraft secondaries are actually on the table. If you are not building around the Warpcraft, the abominant psychic powers, and you're playing, a central mission, you can actually take Psychic Ritual, and it's probably not the end of the world. So, especially because there are some other ways to give your knights the ability to do psychic actions. So you can have potentially 2 Chaos Knights with the ability to Warp Ritual, and that's pretty okay if your opponent doesn't have strong denies. Although we are kind of moving into a metagame where people are going to have strong denies. So I actually do appreciate that they have done a lot to open up the entirety of the secondary, all of the secondary categories for knights. I just think that, this secondary seems so good that it would be tough to lose it. On a 6 objective board, it seems okay. Yeah, maybe. The problem is that, I guess you could do it on, like, a Tide of Conviction. I kind of don't hate it. It feels like you're assuming that you're in a situation where you're tabling your opponent if you're if you are able to complete this action too many times. If you're on your opponent's side of the table and you're clearing their objectives and taking them, and then not dying the subsequent turn, it feels like you're kind of living in Magical Christmas Land. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Do I think the Codex will stomp all over the metagame or demolish all hopes like the NIDS Codex? I think it's too early to say. It feels very balanced, right? But that's what we said about Grey Knights when they came out, and they were not balanced. So, like, at this stage of 9th edition, I don't want to make any, like, sweeping judgments about the power of new codexes. I said before the Tiered Codex came out that the Tiered Codex is probably going to be worse than Crusher Stampede, and oh boy was I wrong. So, who knows? I don't think that it's gonna... It doesn't feel to me like it's super powerful, but I'm sure there's going to be combinations, especially in these Harbinger abilities, where you can, like, stick on a -1 to hit on top of Transhuman, and then you can, like, use your abilities to continue to refresh those. And it's going to be pretty brutal. So I imagine that really good players who are familiar with Chaos Knights and how they play are going to be able to make good use of this. It definitely feels finesse-oriented. That said, to be fair, I don't know how you build a Codex, like, more powerful than the Tyranid Codex in the current metagame. Like, it's freaking wild, dude. All right, should we talk about stratagems? We've been dancing around stratagems for a while. Let's talk about them. Take a drink real quick, though, first. Delightful. All right. We have... starting with battle tactics, break their lines. Iconoclast only gives you +1 to hit if you charged. That's okay. That's good. Love it. It's pretty solid. Hungry for combat. Again, I mentioned before that a lot of these stratagems are focused very much on War Dog units. They're really trying to push War Dog super hard, and so we're starting to see that here. Hungry for combat. You pick one enemy unit. Your War Dogs in the fight phase get Gene Rot Might against them. So 6s to hit, automatically wound. Pretty good if you're swinging multiple times. So if you're into a damage reduction army or something like that, you can do your sweep attacks, and then you get the Gene Rot Might on all the little sweep attacks. That might be wounding on 5s normally. It's pretty good. Pack Hunters. You pick an enemy unit that's engaged by 2 War Dogs. All of your War Dogs fighting that unit gain +1 attack. Or that are within engagement range of that unit gain +1 attack. Interestingly, you don't have to use that attack on that enemy unit. but it's still kind of difficult to set up. I don't know how often that's going to be useful. I'm ready to be proven wrong, but it's also a +1 attack on a War Dog, which is not super exciting. Skies of Fire is the old sort of Sky Reaper protocols updated. You get +1 to hit for a War Dog against an aircraft. Cool. All right, sure. Murder Bliss. So we do have some allegiance keyworded stratagems here, and there are a couple ways to get your allegiance keywords. So that's all the Chaos Gods, Khorne, Slaanesh, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and you can get those by getting a favor that is bestowed by that particular deity, and I believe there's also a stratagem that confers you one of the allegiance keywords. And that unlocks whatever corresponding stratagem for that night. This one gives you, basically blasts your melee attacks. If you're fighting 6 or more enemy models in one unit, you get +1 attack. If you're fighting 11 or more, you get +2 attacks. Important thing to remember, though, is that those can then be used with your sweep profiles. So that really, if you're fighting an infantry unit, that really means 3 or 6 additional attacks, because you're probably swinging a triplicate weapon. So, an Abominant, right, coming in with 9 Tentacle Claw, 3 damage swings. Then, if it's fighting an 11+ model unit, it's swinging 15 of those. If it's Iconoclast, it's swinging 18 of those. If it has another ability to get additional attacks, it's swinging 21 or 24 of those. It gets out of hand pretty quickly. You can sweep some infantry with these guys pretty easily. Tormented Wrath gives you exploding 6s for War Dog against a single enemy. So one unit, all of your War Dogs exploding 6 against that one unit. Again, we're trying to force these War Dog pack tactics, sort of things. With the Chainsword, you can get 4 hit rolls. Oh, is it the Relic Chainsword? Yeah, I haven't gone through the Relics yet. The regular Chainsword's 3 hit rolls, I believe, right? Per attack. The Crush Like a Vermin for Titanic only, so we're switching to the big guys instead of the little guys. You get -1 to hit, but if you hit with your weapons, they take 2 mortal wounds in the attack sequence. So I think this is probably supposed to be a way to use your Titanic feat attacks. You probably move to only hitting on 3s or 4s, but if you're fighting 1 wound infantry, it essentially doubles your damage against them. So every time you hit, 2 guys will die because they take 2 mortal wounds. It doesn't work on monsters or vehicles. It does work on characters. So if you have a character with a strong and vulnerable save, like Kaldor Drago, for example, you can just make all your attacks against him, and then he just gets murdered. It is Titanic feat only, so you're probably only swinging 4 or 5 times with it, though. So it's maybe it probably only gets you 6 to 8 mortal wounds for 1 CP. That's not too bad. Again, especially you can imagine like a Harlequin's unit, right, where they're pretty obnoxious to take out. They're already -1 to be hit, so you don't care about the subtracting 1, and they're only on invulnerable saves, and you just inflict 4 to 6 mortals and you kill the unit. That seems like the situation where you would want this strat. Based on the wording of the +1 attack strat, does it ignore the Death Leaper's turn-off strats ability? Death Leaper's turn-off strats ability is pretty garbage, so it probably does. That is Pack Hunters. Yeah, you select the enemy unit, you don't select the War Dog. Death Leaper only turns off stratagems that say that select an enemy, a unit that is enemy to Death Leaper. So Death Leaper does nothing, because Death Leaper's ability is not good. Vengeful Outcasts gives you +1 to wound against Imperial Knights in melee. That's kind of fun. But for 2 CP is like, no. But most of the time you're running on 3s, so you're going to be going down on wound on 4s, or wound on 2s, which is solid, especially if you're swinging like a big 8 damage attack. And if like this, they have a difficult time sourcing good invulnerable saves, it might be pretty solid. Trail of Destruction has made a return. It gives you reroll once to hit instead of reroll all hit rolls, which is pretty sad. And it only works if you target somebody on an objective marker. It's not just all your attacks full stop, but it is only 1 CP, so that's a little bit of an upgrade. Unyielding Rage. This is only in the fight phase, so it's only melee attacks. It is a -1 damage effect. It's 1 CP on Wardog, 2 CP on the big knights. So we have lost a little bit of our defensive tech, but for 2 CP -1 damage, especially if you're swinging against like high volume 3 damage or 2 damage, is pretty brutal, especially since they're already going to be swinging into potential hit penalties and transhuman effects. So that's pretty good. But again, that's 2 CP, and it probably is not happening until sort of the mid game. So you do have to be pretty cognizant of your CP expenditure in this army. But again, like I said before, there are several ways to get CP regen. Titanic Duel is back, and I believe is mostly unchanged. You and your opponent both choose a number between 1 and 3. If the numbers are different, so there's a little bit of a mind game to it, you can pick 2 to try to be like, hedge your bets a little bit. But if your opponent also picks 2 because they think they're going to hedge your bets, then then nothing happens. If your opponent picks 2 because they think they're going to be playing safe, then you can go for 3. But if they also pick 3 to stop you from getting the maximum, nothing happens. But if you do differ, then whatever number you choose, you get as additional attacks. But with the restriction that all of your attacks have to target enemy Titanic units. Super fun strat. I don't know if I've ever seen it used, but it is cool as hell. That one's super sweet. I'm glad it's made a return. That's one of my favorite, and it's just so evocative. Every time you think about it, you think of like that Dawn of War trailer where there's the knights, the Imperial Knights fighting the Wraith Knights, and you're just like, yeah, these big chain swords flinging around and everything. Pretty into it. Besiege the Dark Gods. This is a return to life, a resurrection stratagem. So if you didn't explode on a 4+, you come back to life on 3 wounds once you're killed. It's 2 CP if it targets a big knight, 1 CP if it targets a little knight. It's classic. It's been in all of the knight. It's been in a lot of codex, full stop, but it's been in a lot of the knight codexes as well. And it's just great. It's just really good. If you trigger it at the end of the phase, then or at the end of the turn, so your opponent doesn't have another phase to try to clear that knight off again, then you're feeling pretty good about yourself. And especially if you do have abilities like the relic we talked about earlier to regenerate your own wounds, you can be slowly building that guy up. There are a couple ways as well to regenerate wounds elsewhere in the codex. Abominable Constitution is this is the Nurgle strat. This one gives you full wounds for determining your characteristics. So again, if you regenerate this dude who's on 3 wounds, then he's also Nurgle keyworded because you have the Nurgle favor. You can top bracket him for that turn. But it is only Nurgle stuff. You can't top bracket anything. Doom and Despair gives you... this is a Harbinger rollback. Sorry. I read something wrong, and I was like, did I get this stratagem totally wrong? After round 2, so round 3, 4, 5, you roll back your Harbinger ability you get a previous Harbinger ability. So that's especially good for the super powerful Harbinger abilities that can give you penalties to hit and stuff like that. It's pretty good. I like that one. Like we said, we also talked about there's also the Corvax ability to get a once per game Harbinger rollback as well. So I guess it's not really a rollback because it's in addition to your current Harbinger ability, I believe. Because it's not instead of your current Harbinger ability, it is only in addition. Yeah, so I think you could potentially have 3 Harbinger abilities active all at once, which is pretty cool. Very nice. The regenerate strat is undivided only. Oh, you're right, chat. Yeah, that is the undivided strat. Yeah, I misspoke. Totally correct. Yeah. So don't try top bracketing the guy who regenerated, because that is illegal. Yeah, fair enough. Death Grip has changed quite a bit. It's actually kind of poopy, I think. If you have a claw, the big fisty weapon, when you hit your target, you roll off with your opponent. So a coin flip that it happens. You get +1 if your strength is higher than the target, which it probably is. If you win the roll-off, you ignore invulnerable saves. If you lose the roll-off, the attack does nothing. So it's kind of weird. It's like if you're fighting against a 4+ invulnerable save, it's kind of like you make your opponent -1 to their invuln. It is every time a saving throw is allocated to the model with the invulnerable save, so you don't have to go through the remainder of the fight sequence. You already know that the wound is going through, and it is a single attack. It's not all of your attacks. Yeah, it's just the one attack. So it's like so much work to try to get through the uninvulnerable save. I think this is only it's only really worth if, like, you have to slow roll your attacks through, and then, or I guess your opponent has to slow roll invulnerable saves or something, because it seems worth to me if it's the last attack on the last model, and you have to ensure that their invulnerable save fails. But again, if you're into a 4+ invulnerable save, it's a 50-50 they would make that invulnerable save anyway. And a roll-off is 50-50, but you get +1, so it's like a, whatever, a 70-30 or something. So you're basically just giving them -1 to a 4+ invulnerable save. If they are a 3+ invulnerable save, it's significantly better odds. But I don't know. It's a very super strange, bizarre stratagem. Absolutely bizarre stratagem. It's so wild. With Spiteful Demise, that's the one we were talking about earlier. It's auto explode. You just blow up. It is 1 CP for War Dogs, 2 CP for the big guys, 3 CP for the Tyrant class, and the Tyrant class trigger their dual core explosion on a 4+ rather than double 6. So that's the extended range of the explosion. So, yeah, I don't know. Seems good. Especially, I think the War Dogs are a 6-inch for D3, so you can kind of force a lot of random mortal wounds on your opponent with that, but the big guys exploding for big distance D6 is a pretty big deal for 2 CP. Love it. We have some requisition stratagems here. The Chosen by the Gods gives you one of the allegiance keywords, so you get Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle / Undivided, and those unlock the stratagems like we just talked about. If you're a Knight Abominant, that's a way to get the Abominant upgrade, basically the Khorne upgrade. You lose your ability to cast psychic powers, and deny psychic powers, I guess. You lose a psychic keyword entirely, but you get +1 weapon skill, +1 attack. So it goes to weapon skill 2, 4 attacks, which means 12 tentacle arm attacks, plus the D3 2 damage attacks, which is something. Although psychic powers are pretty good, so I don't know if I would want to lose psychic powers, to be fair. So that's the way that you get additional Chaos God upgrades. The other way, or keywords. The other way is to just give them a favor with the corresponding keyword. But you can't do it if you already have a favor, so you can't like double stack allegiance keywords. Corrupted Heirlooms gives you an additional relic. This specifically works if you are not a character. So it's somebody that that doesn't have a relic. You can't have 2-on-1 model.
gets a relic regardless of whether or not they're a character. Tyrannical Court is the extra warlord trait stratagem. It gives a non-character a warlord trait, but then makes them a character. So the only way to get character keyword is your one free character that you got at the start of list building because of your detachment. Then Tyrannical Court can also make additional things characters in order to give them warlord traits. We also have Arch Tyrant, which is the double warlord trait stratagem. So if your warlord gets an additional warlord trait, no duplicates. Sick. We're Space Marines now. We have all the Space Marine requisition stratagems, I guess. Bind the Souls of the Slain is an Infernal Household only, and this is one of the ways you can start to heal wounds once you start murdering people. Every time you destroy a model in melee, you use it when you're selected to fight, so it's before you know if you kill anybody, which is a little bit awkward, but you probably kill somebody. You have a lot of attacks. On a 4+, you regain 1 wound to a maximum of 6. So if we're in that situation, right, where we're like Slaanesh keyworded, we use the strat for 1 billion extra attacks, we're using a multiplicative weapon, so we're like 3x swings per attack, and you're swinging like 12 or 18 or 20 times or whatever, your chances of regaining 6 wounds are pretty high. It is a lot of CP to stack all in one place, but on the flip side, you can also be just you could probably just get probably 4 or 5 infantry dead anyway most of the time. It is 2 CP a swing though, which is a little bit tough, but I really like that one for Infernal Households, and it's another upgrade for Infernal Households. I think the competition between Infernal and Iconoclast in this codex is really tight. Because the Infernal Households have... Demonic Surge is great. It's not the most amazing thing in the world, but it's very good. And on top of that, you have the incredible sub-faction abilities they have, and you have strats like this, which is pretty sick. Hunting Hounds gives you... lets you put War Dogs into Strategic Reserve. If you're 6 inches away from a battlefield edge... more than 6 inches away from enemy models, you enter strategic reserves. If you use the strat we talked about previously to come in a turn earlier, you can strategic reserve them turn 1 and then bring them in turn 2 in your opponent's deployment zone. You could also just be starting them in strategic reserve. But this is 2 models in reserve for 1 CP, so it's actually, I think, a little bit faster than normal. Or a little bit cheaper. You're only spending 1 CP to put them in reserve rather than you would normally be spending 2 or 3, I think. I think they're 8 power levels, so it'd be 16, which I think is 3. I don't remember the strategic reserve chart off the top of my head. A Long Leash lets you pick one of your aura abilities from a knight, and you pick 1 war dog, and they get the aura ability at infinite range. So you can give a war dog rerolls to hit. Reroll once to hit from infinite range. If you have the corresponding big knight elsewhere on the battlefield, that one's pretty okay, I guess, if you really need a war dog to be doing stuff that turn. Unleash the Hounds is another like pack tactic style ability for a war dog. It's when a war dog charges an enemy unit, you can give reroll charges for all of your other war dogs who are declared against the same unit. So we're really trying to push this narrative that war dogs are going to be ganging up on people. Maybe somebody forgot that they're like 160 point like big vehicles, but who knows? It's not out of the realm of possibility. And maybe you take like a list that's 1 million war dogs or something. I don't know. Wrath Surge. This one I actually really like, and especially in the context of playing against Tyranids who are going to have 1 million Psychers everywhere. If you fail a Psychic test within 18 inches of a Chaos Knight, so if they just don't get their requisite Warp Charge, for 1 CP, if it's Cornate Chaos Knight, specifically, it's not any Chaos Knight, it's only Cornate. For 1 CP, you immediately perils. That's pretty cool. I like that one. I like that it happens after the test is failed, whereas in the past, some of these have been offensively used. You have to use them like at the start of your opponent's psychic phase, and then if they fail, it happens, which meant you could be wasting CP if they never failed. But now, This one is reactive, which is much more powerful. It's not going to be useful in every game, but occasionally you've got a guy who's wounded by an explosion or whatever. He's trying to cast a spell. He rolls double, a 3 or something. You just, for 1 CP, kill him. And that's pretty good. I like that one. Harrying Hunter allows a War Dog to fall back, operate normally for 2 CP. So like I said before, the War Dogs do have a fallback and do stuff strat. You can fall back, shoot, and charge. No penalty. Sick. Reap and Rend allows you to make an additional hit roll for your big chain swords. So I think that's what we were talking about earlier with the 4 hit rolls per attack. So for 1 CP, you can swing 4 per, and the Rampager starts at 1. Or 5 attacks, 6 with Iconoclast, 7 with the Slanesh strat if you're attacking 6 models. There's 2, or you can stack 2 Warlord traits for additional attacks. So that's 9, and then you 4x them, so you can attack 36 times. And then give it exploding 6s, right? No big deal. Can your opponent take double perils if they re-roll their psychic test after Wrath Surge? No, they would do their re-roll before the test is failed. The re-roll happens like before the result of the roll is checked. Use this stratagem in your opponent's shooting phase on a cast ice model from your arm. Oh, this is Demonic Bulwark, yeah. So this is the new Rotate Ion Shields. It's only ranged attack, 1 CP on War Dogs, 2 CP on the Big Knights. So I did misspeak that there was it wasn't that there's totally no Ion Shields. It just doesn't work in melee anymore, which was wrong. That was wrong. But there it is. You get 4+ invulnerable save for 2 CP. That's pretty good. Infernal Aegis is a return from the previous version, which I think was just Ion Aegis. It gives you a 4+ invulnerable save for War Dogs within 6 inches of a Tyrant class model for 2 CP. Use it in your opponent's command phase, so start of your opponent's turn, which is pretty cool. I like the kind of proactive defensive stuff where you don't have to use it in your turn, but you can set up for it. And if your opponent, has more stuff remaining after your turn than you thought they would, or has like a pretty good alpha strike on you, you can pop that and make all your War Dogs hard to kill. It's probably mostly there if you are taking the Tyrant and you also have War Dogs, and you can set up on turn 1 for it. And then after your opponent goes first, you can give like your entire army a 4+ invuln. If you have a lot of War Dogs, specifically. Probably only worth on like 2 or 3+, but the awkward part is that you do have to have all your War Dogs in like a defensible position, because if you have any that are out in the open and are not in the 4+ invuln, your opponent's just going to attack them. Macabre Projectiles gives you this is the strat to throw vehicles at people when you kill them. So if you have a claw, you kill a vehicle or monster, you pick another enemy within 9 inches, and then you roll on a 3+, you hit them for D3 mortals. On a 6, you hit them for 3. You get -1 on the roll if they're a little character. So if you kill a vehicle, you can throw a bit of it at them to smite them, basically, which is fine. I wish there was a way to get a bonus, like if you throw it at another vehicle or monster, you get +1 to hit or something. Or if you throw it at a big unit. It's kind of weird that they don't. Yeah, it's just penalties if you hit characters. So you could spend 1 CP, roll a 1 or a 2, and nothing happens, which makes it kind of sad. No. Well, it's just a 3+, John. The 5 is the 6 is the auto 3. Ravenous Terror Shades is another dread test ability. So if we're trying to stack our dread test effects, you can use this one. It gives you a it targets a dread test on somebody. For each point that they fail the test by, they take a mortal wound, up to 6. So you have to be stacking leadership effects on people for that to be really meaningful. But it is in the morale phase, so it can happen after if you need to clear someone off before your next turn, you can try it as your last ditch effort. So I think that's one that's like a situational one. That's one you're going to keep in the back of your head just in case you need it, but you're not going to use it every turn. It also can target characters, interestingly. So if you have we did our mortal wounds strat. Maybe somebody exploded. The character's taking a couple wounds. At the end of the turn, you can try to just ping them for a mortal wound if they are in any leadership reducing effects. But again, man, if their leadership is decent and you don't have a bunch of leadership reducing effects active on them, the chance that you actually get too much damage through on these is not very good. Yeah. Throw a tank at somebody for just 3 damage. Yeah. It kind of feels like, like, I don't know, the knight's just like throwing a handful of gravel at someone. Like, he picked up the tank and like ripped it into tiny pieces and is like, just blowing them at them. Just blow sand in their eyes, I guess. Sorcerous Ammunition is really cool, and I really like this one. It is a techno-oracular targeting, so when you hit with an attack before you make the wound roll, you spend 1 CP, it automatically wounds. This is for Tzeentch Knights only, so this is the Tzeentch strat. In addition, if you shot at a Psyker unit, which, non-character Psykers are becoming more and more common, especially with Abominants now being pretty good. If it is a character, it takes a Dread test or immediately paralyzes after you've shot it with all your things. Not the most exciting thing ever, but especially in a universe where there's tons of transhuman effects and hit and wound penalties and stuff like that, just being able to like fire a laser beam at somebody and then automatically wound with it for 1 CP. Nice. Yeah, it's a pocket tank. He's just got a little pouch full of tiny tanks from Ant-Man, right? Just chucking at people. All right, what haven't we talked about? Favors. We haven't talked about favors, chat. Let's talk about those. So we talked about the strats that you unlock with all of these particular upgrades, but let's talk about what the upgrades actually do. Drink time again. Now, interestingly, the tally for all of these does not change depending on the upgrade that you give them. So War Dogs always need 5 kills to upgrade their tally. Abhorrents need 10, and Tyrants need 15. Full stop all the time. Yeah. It's also that your tally is equal to the wounds characteristic of each model you destroy, which means that against like heavy infantry spam, so stuff like Tyranid Warrior spam, or these Centurion lists and Terminator lists that are coming out of Space Marines, your tally can actually pop up pretty quickly. A War Dog only has to kill 2 Tyranid Warriors to unlock its favorite ability. So this will, in some situations, this will happen pretty quickly. Especially even if you're killing, even if you're killing big vehicles and stuff. Like, you can blow up a Chimera, right? And it immediately unlocks your favorite ability. So those favorite abilities do unlock pretty quickly. But obviously, what all of these Favor of the Dark God abilities do is they give you a top ability, and then you get an additional ability once you reach that tally of kills. So, for example, we'll go through the corn ones first. This one was spoiled already. This is Blood Shield. You get once per game, you can use the Blood Shield. It strips all the invulnerable shields from that melee. So you cannot take invulnerable saves with the bearer or against the bearer for that remainder of that fight phase. Who needs that crushing grip thing when you're just punching someone for ignoring invuln saves? Get absolutely slapped. The favorite ability, so once you unlock your favor, you get an additional activation of the Blood Shield, so you get it two times per game. But especially good if you're expecting to play against Custodes or Harlequins or something where they have a lot of invulnerable saves across the army. Getting 2 activations out of that, because for the most part, I imagine, once you activate the Blood Shield once, you're going to be getting enough kills to activate it a second time. So you just have to survive that full round, and then once you do, you get to do it again. Or you do it on your opponent's turn, obviously. If you're an Abominant, and this is the case for all of these coordinate abilities, so not the strat that gives you the corn keyword, and all of the favors. If you're an Abominant, you lose Psyker, but you get +1 weapon skill, +1 attack. Collar of Infernal Brass is an anti-Psyker ability. So while within 12 inches of the bearer, your enemy Psykers get -2 to cast. That's okay. It means that you are... even more likely to trigger that failed psychic test for the auto perils from your Khorne knights. But on the flip side, it's only 12 inches, which means people can be smiting from outside that. It is pretty good if you're trying to build against Maleceptors. It's pretty good because their ability triggers within 12. So if you just lead with this guy, there's a pretty good chance that the Maleceptor doesn't get any abilities off. But, nah, I don't know. The favorite ability means that you cannot be affected by psychic powers, so you also lose the ability to be affected by things like smite and offensive powers that hit the closest enemy unit will no longer do any damage to you, which means you can start sinking smites into that guy and he doesn't take any damage. So very strong anti-psyker effect. Throne Mechanicum of Skulls gives you reroll charges. Sick. You get exploding sixes in melee once you've unlocked the favorite ability. Awkward part is that the favorite ability, like, you do more damage with the favorite ability, which is what the favorite ability would let you do. But probably by the time you've made one charge roll, you're probably doing well. You just have to survive to make the second charge roll. Although you do have that -1 damage in melee strat. So surviving 2 rounds in melee for a Khorne Chaos Knight, probably not the end of the world. It's probably not the toughest thing. Pyro Throne gets you, you become a Psyker and you know Smite. And 1 Warp Storm power, which we haven't talked about yet, which we should. I love this. This is sick. And especially, like I was just talking about, right? You could be taking an Abominant, and you could be taking another Knight with the Pyro Throne to get the Psyker ability. If you upgrade an Abominant with it, they know an additional power and cast additional power. And then the favorite ability is +1, or is reroll a psychic test. There's also a relic for +1 to cast as well. So you can make your Psykers pretty effective in this faction. You can be 3 casts at +1 with a reroll. It's pretty solid. Cursed Rune of Fate gives you, this is like the Harlequin like Victor of the Blood games, where you for once per excuse me, this is a reflection. We have there's a Victor of the Blood games later. Spoiler, sorry. This reflects mortal wounds on saving throws of 6 against ranged attacks. So you could also be having the Warlord trait we talked about earlier, which gives you reflecting wounds on 6s in melee. This one gives you in with ranged attacks. I kind of like that one better. Reflecting, you're going to be taking a lot more ranged saves, in my opinion, than melee saves in a Chaos Knight's army, because your opponent's probably only engaging you in melee when they know they can kill you, because if they don't kill you, it's going to be bad for them. So reflecting, especially if your opponent has high volume, like low impact shooting, reflecting mortal wounds back on them is pretty solid. And I like the like mental image of this upgrade where they're just like Jedi reflecting lasers back at people. Like you shoot a bunch of bullets at them and they're just like boop, 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 and then they all fly back and hit you, which is pretty cool. The favorite ability is a 4+ invulnerable save. Importantly, not only ranged attacks for the 4+ invuln, it's also melee, which is a pretty big deal since you normally don't have an invuln in melee. Mirror of Fates is one of the several ways you can regen CP with. It gives you a 5+ regen on your opponent's command point rolls. And this one does have the Victor of the Blood games effect. So the favorite ability is after you make a hit, wound, or saving throw, you can change the result to a 6. Once per round. So just like the Harlequin ability that they used to give to all their Death Jesters to let them do one hit roll of 6 to explode into multiple wound rolls, you get that if you have unlocked your favorite ability. If this is on a dude who's just sitting in the back and shooting all game, I feel like you unlock that favorite ability around 2 or around 3, and then he just becomes more and more effective as the game goes on. And I really like that. I like this upgrade as well. These Zinch upgrades are really solid. I'm super into them. You can reflect a hammerhead shot. Yeah. I mean, you can. You're just. Yeah, I guess that's true, chat. You would still roll the save regardless of the AP of the incoming attack, right? Yeah, that's fair. the hammerhead shoots you for 12, and you're like, oh yeah, take 1, and they're like, all right. That's cute though. It reflects back like one particle of the railgun slug. Nurgle, Putrid Carapace. You get +1 save against damage 1 weapons. The favorite ability is +1 toughness, so you can get a knight to toughness 9. Pretty solid. This one seems okay, I guess. I think you really want to be activating that toughness 9 in order for this one to be really good. Blessing of 1,000 Poxes gives you a Gene Rot Might in melee, so 6s to hit, automatically wound. The favorite ability is Gene Rot Might in range. This one's probably not that good. You're attacking like strength 12 or strength 16 weapons at people. Like, I don't know how often you need Gene Rot Might effects. Unless you, I mean, maybe when you're attacking with a billion attacks, but even then you probably want different abilities. You probably want defensive abilities so that you have a greater chance to make those, have more fight activations. I don't really like this one at all. Aura of Corruption gives you a 6-inch aura of -1 strength from enemy models. So that's pretty good because you're going to be impacting people charging you in melee. So it's like kind of +1 toughness with extra steps. A lot of times you're going to be forcing, like, strength 5 wounds you on 6s now. Strength 8 wounds you on 5s. Strength 9 wounds you on 4s. Not that big of a deal if you have a transhuman effect active, but pretty good anyway. And then the favorite ability is you also reduce their toughness by 1. But again, you're probably hitting them with like strength a billion, so the -1 toughness doesn't matter so much. It matters for other things attacking them. So if you're attacking them with little guns off war dogs and stuff like that, then that's pretty good. The -1 toughness is going to be effective, but I don't know how often that's gonna happen. Nurgle, I think, kind of the loser out of all these, unfortunately. You'd think that defensive mechanics on Chaos Knights would be pretty solid, but Nurgle is just kind of meh. Although it does give you that top bracket strat, which is pretty solid, which is, very good, obviously. So maybe it's worth it just for access to that stratagem. I don't know. Slanesh. Noticing here that we're a little bit off screen. There it is. Quicksilver Throne, which I think we've talked about before in the Warhammer community article, gives you heroic intervention as if you were a character. Again, you can also upgrade to be a character if you give them a warlord trait, so you don't necessarily need that. But it also gives you fight first, which is fine. It's good if you are intervening into people, because normally they would be fighting first. Or if they charged, they would be fighting first and be able to attack you. But if you have fight first, then you're at the same time as them. So your opponent has to be a little bit more careful with how they select their fighters. Yeah, I agree. I think the All is Dust ability is the best one. All is Rust? Yeah, that's good. I think that is the best one out of the Nurgle, for sure. I would agree with that, chat. The -1 strength is maybe maybe there's a situation where you consider that. It really depends on, like, the metagame you're into, because it only affects a very limited range of strength values. This one gives you D3 plus 3-inch piling consolidation. That's pretty good for stealing objectives away from people. There is a warlord trait that gives you objectives secured, so giving you the ability to intervene on objectives while you're OBSEC and do big pile and consolidate, so lets you like play weird objective games, especially with how big a knight base is. If you can do D3 plus 3 pile and consolidates, you can sometimes like steal other objectives from people. Beguiling Majesty. This one's so good, chat. -1 to hit and wound in melee. -1 to hit and wound. It gives you an aura of acquiescence in the favorite ability. So 6 inches, enemies get -1 attack. Oh my god. It's enemy units within 6 inches too. Even if one person is within 6 inches, the entire unit is -1 attack. Oh, that's brutal. That one's absolutely brutal. And then the Subjugator Machine Spirit allows you to advance and fall back and shoot. In addition, you can advance or fall back and charge if you've upgraded your favorite ability. This one's a really good one because advancing and charging is super solid. The downside is that you have to... Trying to get your favorite ability active to get that is a little bit awkward because, it's harder to unlock that if you're not being able to charge after you advance anyway in the early game. But to be fair, if round 1... you can advance and shoot. Round 2, you can advance, shoot. If you then unlock your favorite ability, assuming I'm not misspeaking here, I'm pretty sure that's how that works. If you advance and shoot, then your favorite ability would retroactively take into account, come into play once you hit the charge phase, and then you could do it. Yeah, so it comes into play at the end of a phase. So you can advance in the movement phase if you then shoot hard enough to unlock the favorite ability. You are then eligible to charge because it will trigger at the end of the shooting phase and you'd go into the charge phase. So that's like kind of cute. I think that one is probably fine. Not to a minimum of 1 on Beguiling Majesty. Oh, and the -1 attacks? Yeah. It doesn't have a minimum on it. Is there a core rule on the minimum? I don't know that one. Let's see. Modifying characteristics. Only strength, toughness. Oh yeah, attacks and leadership cannot be modified below 1. So you don't. It doesn't need a minimum 1. It's in the core rules. So you can't make people 0 attacks when they charge you. Sorry, chat. Beguiling Majesty, though. Oh my god. All the Slash ones are great. All the Zinch ones are great. Woo. Woo. And then these ones, the Undivided ones, also good. So Mark of the Dread Knight gives you a 6+ damage ignore. Full stop. That's pretty good. On a 24 wound knight, that's already 4 extra wounds. You're effectively 28. If you are on one of the Iconoclast house, or if you're on one of the households that gets extra wounds, it gets even better. The favorite ability is 5+ damage ignore. Glorious. It's just so straightforward and good. Warp Born Stalker lets you deep strike. Cool. All right. The favorite ability is you can redeploy. Super cool. Losing a knight for a turn sucks, but doing it to a war dog is kind of cute. So I don't strongly dislike that one. Having deep strikes in general is pretty solid. It's nice that you have access to that, and it's also nice that these aren't like you can just take this in any of your armies. It's not like you're, locked into playing Khorne or Slash or something. Everyone's a Chaos Knight, so you can have all the different marks in one detachment. And one of them can just be undivided, and you can deep strike it. So I like that. Blessing of the Dark Master is the one that was spoiled in Warhammer community that people freaked out about. You cannot reroll against the knight, and once its favorite ability triggers, it is transhuman permanently. A little bit less exciting now that we know that any demonic household has access to permanent transhuman all the time, if they want a demonic surge for it, but still pretty good. Still pretty good, especially since we're talking about a faction that has. It has the rotate in range against ranged attacks, and it has the -1 damage against melee attacks. So, pretty solid. It's all good. We haven't talked about Warlord traits, relics, and psychic powers yet. We'll talk about Warlord traits real quick. It's important to remember that you can give a Warlord trait to anything in the army for 1 CP, and you can give the Warlord 2 Warlord traits. So you can stack these on top of each other. Eager for the Kill gives you +1 to advance and charge. So if you have unlocked your Quicksilver Throne and you can advance and charge, you are now +2 to your total threat range. If you're a Despoiler who's already a 12-inch threat range, you can advance D6 +1, then charge 2d6 +1. So your threat range actually gets really pretty high. You have to have unlocked the advance and charge ability, though, which is a little bit tough. That's true, chat. Yeah, it's trans Hitman. You're right. For the Dark Master ability, the Bellacore ability. Yeah. It's hit rolls fail, not win rolls. That on top of not rerolling is a pretty big deal. Harbinger of Scrap Code, it's kind of garbage. You bottom bracket an enemy vehicle if they fail a dread test and they take 3 mortal wounds. Or they have wounds remaining. So in mid brackets, if they're at top, but they took 3, so there's a pretty decent chance they're at bottom bracket. Or they get -1 weapon skill, ballistic skill. But again, they have to fail a dread test. It's only within 18 inches, and whatever. It's only vehicles, so if you hit like another faction that has no vehicles, you're just fucked. It's just kind of bad. Warp Haunted Hull gives you 5+ ignore against mortal wounds, or against all damage in the psychic phase, actually, which is kind of sick. And you get an extra deny on top of whatever you had. So if you are not a psyker, you can deny 1 as if you are a psyker. And if you are a psyker, you get 1 additional deny the witch. That one's pretty strong. Knight Diabolus, +1 attack, and reroll hit rolls of 1. So if you are a 2+ weapon skill despoiler, for example, you're going to be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. Sick. If you're an Abominant who is Corn keyworded, then you are weapon skill 2 as well. Infernal Quest is you get objective secured. That's a holdover from the last edition and has always been very good. And I think for 1 CP, you're always going to have an OBSEC Big Knight, I think. And then Aura of Terror is, this is, one of the combo pieces that can buff your dread tests while you're within dread range, which importantly is only 12 inches to start, unless you have something that upgrades it. You roll an additional d6 to discard the lowest result when you're taking a morale test or a dread test. Yeah, so that's pretty solid. And then it's important. The lowest result here is important because all of those tests look for high results. So we're discarding, look for high results to fail them. As the Knight player, you are hoping that they roll high. So discarding the lowest is the way you want it. So you have a couple interesting combos just in your Warlord traits. You can get Eager for the Kill to make your big knights faster, your melee knights faster, and if they touch your opponent's deployment zone, so if you can set up a big charge turn 1, then you get +1 attack on top of Knight Diabolus, who has a base +1 attack, and if you're Iconoclast, you're another +1 attack. So you can potentially be getting +3 attacks right off the bat. You do have to, be able to get there, but once you do, if you have a triplicate weapon, you're attacking probably 24 times. That's pretty all right. It's pretty good. Love it. Is there a -1 damage strat? There is, but it's only melee attacks. Yeah. It's not, yeah. So your ranged attacks, you have the invuln buff, and then against ranged attacks, you have the damage reduction. We'll talk about psychic powers real quick. They're kind of straightforward, which I appreciate. Winds of the Warp is a 5+ damage ignore on the Psyker itself. This one has a buffed ability, so kind of like the Azuriani psychic powers, where if you roll X or higher, and those ones used to extend the range, but this one gives you it pulses an aura up to 6 inches. When War Dogs are within it, they get a 6+ damage ignore, which is kind of cute. I don't know if you would push for that. You can give them, like I said, reroll psychic tests and +1 to cast, so you can make it on a 7 with a reroll. It's like a coin flip to get it off. Pretty all right. Vortex Terrors, 18 inches. One enemy unit gets -1 leadership. So again, we can stack leadership buffs to make those dread tests harder. And then when it shoots or fights, it takes a dread test. If it fails, it reduces its weapon skill ballistic skill. So that stacks with other penalties to hit. So you can potentially be giving it -2 to hit if you have, your -1 to hit from outside 12 inches Harbinger effect up or something, for example. Again, it has to be a dread test, though. You are -1 leadership, so the dread test is a little bit more easier to get off, but it's very matchup dependent. Storm Malevolent picks an enemy unit within 18. Each time you melee attack against that unit, you get the sniper roll, so 6s to wound, deal a mortal wound in addition, and you get +1 to wound. So you're probably wounding on 2s with almost everything in the Codex if you're attacking a little people, and then you're also going to be dealing mortal wounds on top. So that mostly seals the fate of small units against the big Chaos Knight that's going to be rolling multiple attacks against them. Cyclonic Lamentation is a dread test that deals a mortal wound for every failure. So it's kind of like the strat that you have for it. If you roll 11+, then they take D3 for every failure. Oh, excuse me, it's a pulse. It's not a single target. Everything within 12 takes the test, and if they fail, they take a wound or D3. This one's kind of poopy, to be honest. I don't know how often, you're trying to move aggressively to get your opponent in these offensive auras, but pulsing out for 1 mortal wound distributed across the entirety of your opponent's army is the least effective distribution of mortal wounds you can possibly have. And again, it's subject to a dread test, and a lot of your leadership reducing effects are targeted. So you can't be affecting their whole army with them for the most part. Not entirely true, but sort of similar. But so this one's kind of less exciting. Coruscating Hate, on the other hand, is pretty cool. It's a Warp Charge 6 nuke. Closest visible enemy takes D3 mortals. Then you roll for the next closest enemy within 6 of that one. On a 4+, they also take D3 mortals. Or they take 1 automatically. On a 4+, they take D3 instead. So it's like it's a chain smite. You smite the nearest thing, and the next nearest thing also takes D3. It's interesting that the second unit has to be visible to the first unit, so that's kind of fun. It bounces. It doesn't bounce through walls. It bounces around walls, which is kind of cute. I really like the psychic power. I mean, that's really solid. If you're just a 2 cast, I think the number 1 cast you probably want is Winds of the Warp to get that 5+ damage ignore. But other than that, if you're just smiting and casting Coruscating Hate, that's an appreciable amount of damage coming out of your Abominant. Lastly, over here we have Spite Squall. This one is ignore Overwatch and set to defend, so like a lot of the effects that we've had that do that same thing. Then, for each phase until your next Psychic phase, for an entire battle round, you keep a tally for the unit every time a model in the unit is destroyed. At the end of each phase, you roll 1d6 for each mark on the tally. On a 5+, they take an additional mortal wound. So, essentially, there's a 33% chance that every casualty they take also inflicts a second mortal wound. Full stop. Which is kind of cool, especially if you are hitting a big unit in multiple phases. I don't know, it's just kind of sweet. So you shoot them with like a couple guns and you kill a couple people. They then roll a bunch of dice for each guy that was killed. On a 5+ for each of those dice to take a mortal wound. Then you charge them, you attack them a bunch. You roll, assuming there's a couple guys left, you roll for the number of casualties they took. Then, on a 5+, you take another mortal wound. If you have another one of these effects that deals mortal wounds, like in the morale phase, for example, I believe that the strat, the Psychogeist, or whatever it's called, strat? Terror Shades. Terror Shades. Happens in the morale phase and deals mortal wounds. If you deal mortal wounds there, you would then also roll for the Spite Squall tally again. So, very cute psychic power. It does feel like kind of a win more, because I don't know how often there's going to be like a big enemy unit that you're going to have trouble killing. But, I don't know. It's pretty cute. I like it. I think it also works on... it works on models being destroyed, so I think it also just works on failed morale tests, because I think those models are considered to be destroyed. But that's probably worth checking. Survey says, yes, a model removed from play that as a result of fleeing counts as having been destroyed. So that means that it would also work on morale checks. So yeah, there are essentially, and also if you have charge phase impact attacks, there's a couple ways to do those. There's the Hammer of Wrath strat that we talked about, the Trample strat that we talked about that deals damage in the movement phase. Psychic, any additional damage they take in the Psychic phase will also add to their tally. So, like, you could potentially be rolling over the course of, like, 5 phases or so. For the most part, it's mostly, it's just every casualty is a chance for a mortal wound at the end. The whole tally mechanic doesn't really matter, but it's interesting that you can try to force additional damage on multiple different phases. All right. Let's move on. Let's talk about some relics and stuff. Because the relics are kind of spicy. So, Blasphemous Engine gives you a 2+ ignore mortals from Demonic Surge specifically. So this is kind of like the regenerative warlord trait that we talked about earlier. You have a pretty good chance at free rolling your demonic surge effect. You also double wounds for bracketing. Sick, solid. I love it. It's very, very pretty straightforward. Veil of Medringard is probably going to be taken almost all the time. It's abhorrent or iconoclast. It's iconoclast only, first off, so not on your demonic households. So that is a buff for the iconoclast specifically. It's only abhorrent in War Dog. You can't put it on the tyrant. And it's a 4+ against ranged and a 6+ against melee. So again, difficult to source those invulnerable saves in melee, but this is one of the ways you can do it. But you can't rotate that invulnerable save because the rotate only improves you to a 4+, and it doesn't work in melee at all. Helm of Warp Sight ignores hit roll, ballistic skill modifiers, and ignores cover. Also good. Again, abhorrent or War Dog only, doesn't work on Titans or on Tyrants, excuse me, which sucks. Diamonos. That's it. It's a big laser destructor. It's 3 shots instead of 2, strength 16, AP 5, D3 plus 6. So it's an extra shot, basically, and 2 extra strength. So it wounds enemy toughness 8 on 2s instead of 4s, or instead of 3s, which is good because there's a lot of toughness 8 out there right now. If we're talking about things like Tyranid monsters are largely toughness 8. Enemy knights are going to be toughness 8. All those are going to get wounded on 2s by this guy. Unless they transhuman, obviously. AP 5, D3 plus 6 is pretty spicy, but the extra attack is really what you're going for there. Just the 2 attacks off this thing is pretty garbo for the base profile, but 3 off of the upgraded one is nice. The Teeth That Hunger is the relic chainsword, and I think I might have to pull up the original chainsword to see what it is. I think it is, it's +8 instead of +4 strength on the sweep, is that right? Or on the strike, excuse me, and the sweep has a strength bonus, so it's just higher strength for the most part. Where are you at, Chainsword? So it's 6, AP 4, 6, or user 3, 2. And this one is 8, AP 4, 6, 2, 3, 2. Okay, so it's literally just +2 strength. Cool. All right. It's okay. Sure. That seems fine. Rune of Nachtgra. What a name. Good stuff. It's Dreadblades only. You get an additional Fell Bond. All the Fell Bonds are good. We covered them previously. They are all very solid effects. An extra Fell Bond is certainly worth a relic slot. So I love that. That's pretty good. I think you can use these on your super heavy auxiliary detachments. Detachment Fell Blades, is that right? Yeah, because the stratagem section doesn't have an exclusion for super heavy auxiliaries. So if you have just one Dreadblade as an Agent of Chaos, you can be getting an additional Fell Bond for that, which is cool. Oh, the teeth give you an extra attack. Oh, I totally missed that, chat. Yeah. All right. I'll buy it. Okay. That makes total sense. I thought it was just +2 strength. I totally missed this first sentence in here. What a convoluted thing right here, because it has three lines of text before the profile after the weapon title. Very annoying. That's annoying to read. All right, but absolutely fair. Makes one additional attack with the big sword, which you can then split to 3 with the sweep profile. All right, I like it. Teeth is also +1 AP. Is it? No, the base one's AP 3, right? AP 3 and 4? Yeah. The base one's AP 3 and 4. Teeth are the same AP. Okay, so this guy, if he's on a despoiler, right, you're 5 attacks, 6 with the teeth. You can get +2 from warlord traits, so you go to 8, +1 from iconoclast, so 9, and then you sweep with it. So you make 27. And then you do the 1 CP strat for an extra attack, so you do 36 attacks. 36 attacks, chat. We're doing it. It's so many. That's fun. You hit on 2s and you reroll 1s with the warlord trait too. I kind of like that. I wonder, like, what's the average damage on that? Oh, by the way, we're at 69 likes right now, which means I need to screenshot it. I apologize. Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. 21 sweep attacks. 21 sweep attacks is garbage. 36 is where we're at. Oh, you can't reroll hits? That's fine. You hit on 2s anyway. Like, who cares? You're rolling 36 attacks. You get +9 attacks with that strat. That's fine. Tyrant's Banner, +3 inches to your aura abilities. And here's the important part. And this was already there previously. You get a CP in each of your command phases on a 5+. So it's probably 2 extra CP over the course of the game. It should refund itself over the course of the game, assuming you don't die. The extra aura abilities are pretty good, especially if you're taking War Dogs alongside. And you can stack that with the CP regen from the Tzeentch ability too. And you could, in fact, even just put the Tzeentch ability on this guy. It is abhorrent only, so you can't put it on a Tyrant or a War Dog, which is sad, but I think it's probably fine. And I kind of like it for 1 CP. Unless you have unless you're running out of slots for your relics and you need that slot open for it, I think it's kind of a free roll, theoretically. There are going to be situations where you don't roll a 5+ and you're very sad about it, but at least you get the 3 inches to your aura abilities. The Bound Viridian Psychogeist. You get Rending so 6s to wound are +2 AP, and you get a reroll on a damage roll, and that is all of your attacks, full stop. It is only abhorrent in War Dog, so it doesn't work on your big laser beams, but it's good on a thermal cannon, I think, because you get a free damage reroll. The extra 2 AP, this is a little bit weird because the weapons are the effects are a little bit at odds. The wound rolls of 6 +2 AP you want on small weapons with high volume, so you have more chances to roll a 6, and your AP is already relatively low. So the extra 2 AP has a higher impact. So I'm thinking like maybe a brigand that has the chain gun and the thermal spear. You kind of get the most use out of it. Maybe also like a guy with a Gatling cannon and a thermal cannon. I don't know. The damage reroll is pretty good because a lot of times you're going to be CPing your damage rerolls if you roll a 1 on the thermal cannon anyway. So that's kind of a free roll in and of itself. And then the rending ability is kind of also nice. And especially if you are in a universe where Armor of Contempt exists. So pushing your AP to like 3 or 4 is a pretty big deal. The aura buff also buffs the 6-up spell for War Dogs. Yeah, I don't know if I would really be pushing that too hard. Because that's tough to cast. And especially since you don't get a cast bonus. So as we're talking about that, right, the Twisted Mask is probably the easiest way to get that ability off, and that would take your relic slot. So like I don't know if I would build around getting an 8-up to cast on a Psychic Power off. It's a little bit tough. Psycho Geist with New Knights means each 6 to wound will be 3 mortal wounds and AP 3. Oh, with the with the Volkite, yeah, for sure. You're just fishing for 6s. You're like CP reroll 2. I need a 6. Let's go. Traders, Mark. Well, enemy is within dread range. They cannot use insane bravery or reroll morale tests. Nice. I wish it also like stopped like morale buffing effects. I don't So like if you could turn off like synapse, or you could turn off like chaplain auras, I feel like that would be pretty good. And that, like, now we're talking about like a real combo here we can actually build on, but I don't know. There's not a lot of things that let you reroll morale tests just generically. Once per battle, at the start of any battle round after the first, you can select any Harbinger ability. So you can ignore the Harbinger chain you're down. So because you can only bounce across the chart one step, this one basically lets you bounce 2 steps once per game. And you can also... that also affects your bearer for the remainder of the battle. Oh, that's cool. All right. All right. So it's a once per game you unlock an additional Harbinger ability for yourself only from any of the trees. But it has to be previous to the current battle round. Yeah. Well, I wish like something stopped synapse, right? Like, it's kind of it's obnoxious that there's this entire faction based around morale checks, and you're just like, F you, you're immune. Whatever. But I think this Harbinger ability is probably pretty good because you can. The really good Harbinger abilities are like round 3, and having to wait until round 4 to unlock them is really tough. So what do you get on round 1? It's just previous battle round, right? At the start of any battle round, you can select one other Harbinger ability from that battle round. Oh, from the current battle round. So round 3, you can turn on -1 to be hit permanently, but it only affects you. It only really affects you for 2 rounds then. So you can do it to turn on Encroaching Doom on round 2 permanently. Then if you have any other dread affecting abilities, you now have a 15-inch dread aura. It's kind of cute. You can also permanently turn on Geist Storm to make people mess up. I feel like what they want you to do is like permanently turn on one of these like leadership affecting things and be like, you can't reroll, you can't insane bravery, here's a bunch of penalties to your morale check. But for a whole relic slot and like jumping through 25 hoops, I don't know, man. Tough stuff. Gauntlet of Ascension. Relic Gauntlet. I'm going to read all the text this time so I don't miss any part of it. You get +1 strength and attacks every time you kill a character with it. And otherwise, it's basically just a regular thing. Really? Oh, you reroll hits with it. It rerolls hits. All right. Okay. That's pretty all right. I kind of like that. The Twisted Mask we just talked about, you know, additional power, and you get +1 to cast. That's always good, and I'm here for it. I really like it. If you're taking an Abominant, probably have that one. Panoply of Cursed Knights gives you 2+ armor save. Good, like it. That's a solid upgrade. Against AP2, it means it's the same as Veil of Medrigal. If it is, or Medrigard, if it against AP1, you're just strictly better. Soul Raptor Swarm, you get 4+ ignore demonic surge. So we have a 2+ ignore demonic surge, and we have a 4+ ignore demonic surge. Sure. You also, if enemies run away within 12 inches of you or within dread range, then you regenerate a lost wound for each model that flees. Maximum of 3 wounds per phase. So you can also stack that with the... because this is a demonic or an infernal household relic, you can stack that with the heal when you kill people, which means you could be healing 9 wounds a turn. And that's a lot of wounds. That's a lot. Helm of Dogs, +1 attack on a War Dog, and you reroll wounds of 1 in an aura. So you can reroll hit rolls of 1 if you're near one of the requisite knights, the Rampager for melee attacks, and the Despoiler for ranged attacks, right? And then you can also reroll 1s to wound. He becomes a little bit of a little teeny lieutenant. Although importantly, it is all War Dogs, which means it also affects himself. So at the very base level, it's +1 attack and reroll 1s to hit. And then if you have another War Dog near you, you're also rerolling their reroll 1s to wound, excuse me. And then they're also rerolling 1s to wound, which is also pretty good. I don't know. That seems fine. Is it worth a whole relic slot though? I don't know. Oh, this is not Demonic Surge, is it? Oh, I'm sorry, chat. I totally misread that then. Yeah, you're right. So it's a 4+ against mortals unless it's Demonic Surge. It's not a 4+ against mortals if it's Demonic Surge. Okay. All right. That also makes sense. Sure. I mean, that's much better, to be fair, than the other thing. That's a good call out, though. Yeah, that's a little confusing. Is Ion Shield... Base Ion Shield is a 5+ invulnerable save. Chat. And then you can do the Rotate Ion strat, which is called something Bulwark. Diabolic Bulwark to get a 4+ invulnerable save. But I think that's it. I think we've gone through the entire thing. I know there were some people asking to look at some specific stuff. Does anybody have any requests before we move off of the Codex here? And also, what are your thoughts on the updated Codex? I know that's there's a lot to take in for sure, and it's very different. I mean, the base profiles are basically identical, but all of the surrounding effects, it's kind of like Custodes, right? Where Custodes didn't change very much from a core mechanical standpoint, but all of their special abilities were much different. You can send the Soul Raptor up the board to Sug Mortals from Thousand Suns, Nibs, or Grey Knights. I don't know if it's actually viable, but it seems like it could be. Yeah, I think so. If you're in a situation, if you're in a meta game where you're super duper worried about mortal wounds, that's definitely a good ability to have. You can also try, I mean, there's the Corn Favor, where once you unlock it, you become totally, like, almost entirely immune to mortals. You can't be affected by psychic powers, but most mortals are from psychic powers specifically. No Crusade rules, chat, no. Can you give all of your knights the same god ability? There's only 3, and you can only take 1 of each favor per army, so it would be difficult to take all 1 god for the knights. Although you can use the strat to give them the keyword if you want it, but it doesn't really do anything besides giving you the access to the strat. What's the maximum turn 1 charge threat range? It's probably pretty short, I think. I think you can come out with +1 to advance and charge. So, like, if you're rolling perfectly, it's like 26, right? Off a 12-inch mover. But I don't think there are any charge buffs in the strats. There's just the Warlord trait for +1 advance and charge and extra attack if you're in their deployment zone. So I think they've lost their advance and charge unless you unlock the Quicksilver Throne. Once you've unlocked the Quicksilver Throne, it gets really far. But that probably doesn't happen until at least turn 2. Is there something about Disciples of Be'lakor? No, there's no they don't talk about Disciples of Be'lakor at all. Can you run an all Dreadblade army? All right, so that's something that we should talk about, because I'm not 100% sure how the keywords work precisely. I think I noted down how Dreadblades get selected. I apologize, chat. This is the keywording is very confusing. Welcome to 9th edition 40k, where the rules are made up and the keywords don't matter. So there's a lot of stuff that excludes Dreadblade keyworded stuff. But I'm as yet unclear on how you gain the Dreadblade keyword. Like, there's a lot of stuff that refers to Dreadblades, but I don't know where the... I don't know what confers that keyword, to be honest. I wonder if I'm just totally missing it. There also, I mean, there is a potential also that we're missing. There may be sections missing. I'm not sure. There are a couple like open spots. A lot of people are asking about Crusade rules. I have no idea what the Crusade rules are. They aren't in the document that I got, so who knows? But it is what it is. It's on page 23. Yeah, I don't have page 23 of the file that I have, so I couldn't tell you. You replace the Dread household keyword with Dreadblade? Is that in the Dread household rules? Did I just miss it? Yeah, I wonder if that's just a section I don't have, because I don't think I have anything that says where it points out that you replace the household keyword with Dreadblades. But maybe it's literally, I'm just literally looking over it because I'm a big dummy. It's after chapter approved rules. So not page 23, because that's like page 70 something. Right? Oh, it's on Datasheets. Okay, yeah, that's page 96. So when you include a unit with a Dread household keyword, you must do one of the following. Replace a Dread household keyword with with the household it is from, or replace Dread household with Dreadblade. So here's the part that's confusing to me, chat. So the original question from Skipster Starcraft was, can you run an all Dreadblade army? It sounds like yes, right? Because every time you add a Dread household unit, you can just say it's a Dreadblade. The awkward part is that, to my reading, that's a selectable keyword change, right? So if you have at least one Dreadblade, your entire army must be Dreadblades, if you're playing Grand Tournament specifically. Unless there is something that says that that's not how that works. And I did have that noted down in my notes, but I'm not sure that's how that works entirely. Oh no, there is. Just kidding. I'm sorry, chat. There is an exception for it in the GT book. No, we're good. Just kidding. We're all good. So the answer to the original question is yes. You can run an all Dreadblade army if you want. They all, I believe, have to have different bonds, which means you do sort of run out of... I guess there's enough that you should have a lot to play through. Take a look at the bonds real quick here. They each get one instead of their demonic household. And each Dreadblade has a unique fell bond.
Can you stack the God, Favor stratagem, and Coordinate stratagem to give the Knight Abominant an effective 1+ weapon skill, 2+ attacks? No, you cannot do that. The stratagem to get an Allegiance keyword specifically can only be targeted on something that doesn't have a Favor. So it's no good. Can't do that. Turn 2 Despair, would it reduce a synaptic link range for abilities like Will of the Hivemind? Probably not. Probably not. Let's take a look. Where are we at? So turn 2 of Creeping Dismay. -3 range from aura abilities and command phase abilities. No. No, synaptic link isn't like it's not a posted range. If it's a unique mechanic. I think it also similarly does not affect dread range either. Which is why those mechanics are labeled something differently. Otherwise, they would just say 12 inches. As far as I know, Imperial Knights have not been spoiled, chat. I apologize for all the Imperial Knights players out there. You'll have to wait a little bit. A little bit longer. Anyway, that's all we have to talk about today. Just a whole codex going on over here. I think some pretty interesting stuff. I'm curious to see how they play. Because I think there's a lot of manipulation you can do of the special ability, the Harbinger ability. And so, you know, being able to manipulate or stack your Harbinger abilities in interesting ways, especially with all the ways that you have to roll back those abilities and to, gain additional ones is going to be pretty awesome. And then those on top of all of the built-in resilience that you can have from the favors and from the subtraction abilities, I think all of those are pretty sweet. So I think it's going to be a very unique army to play against. I appreciate how aggressive they're trying to make it. I think they really just need to change, I think, how morale stuff works, because I have a sneaky suspicion that their morale phase manipulation is not going to be useful. Which sucks, because there is so much of this codex that is based on morale manipulation, and I'm pretty sure all of it is bad. But I'm happy to be proven wrong. If somebody's like, hey man, I made the sweet thing where you're like -5 leadership and can't reroll and can't auto pass, and also it affects dread abilities, so you take 1,000 dread tests and take a million wounds, and I mean, that'd be cool. The Psyker Knight is cool, yeah. I appreciate that it's a 3 damage multiplicative attack, which none of the other ones are, besides the Fist, which is only 2 extra swings. So the Fist sweep is 3 damage, but attacks 2 times, right? Yeah, the Chainsword is 2 damage, but it attacks 3 times, but the Fist is 3 damage, but attacks 2 times per attack. And the tentacles are the best of both worlds, which actually means I think the Knight Abominant has kind of the best stacking, attack stacking out of everybody, because its weapons are good in every situation, and it gets those D3 extra attacks from its little tiny mace thing, which is pretty sick. So I really like this guy. His gun's a little bit. I think when I first breezed over the datasheet, I thought the gun had more attacks. I thought it was 8 attacks, I think. I was a little bit more excited about it. But the 3 mortal wounds in addition is pretty solid, especially since you're probably going to roll 1 or 2 of those over the course of your attack, especially if you have the Master Artisan's reroll or something active. So that's pretty good. I think he's going to be pretty solid, for sure. Morale manipulation, dread stuff is opponent dependent. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it might be something you have to build for your opponent. Definitely. I'll agree with that. New Kid is best? I don't know if he's the best. How many points are the Abominants? I do think he's very good, but I don't know if I would say it's out and out the best. Yeah, it is 430 points. So you're paying 30 points over what you would for one of the other knights, and that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. The Despoiler, man, got hammered. Look at that points cost in the Despoiler. Holy shit. You're like at least 500. You're 400 points for almost all the other knights, and you're like 500 points for a Despoiler. Fuck. That's tough. That's a tough one. Not to mention the fact that these favorite abilities are very expensive, I think, if you're putting them on the big knights. I do appreciate that some of the favorite abilities, it looks like, get less expensive if you put them on Tyrants. Probably the ones that are based on speed and melee attacks. So there is a little bit going on for Tyrants here, despite the fact that a lot of stuff is specifically non-Tyrant oriented. Wouldn't Synaptic Linchpin do nothing since it improves the range of command abilities, which are all Synaptic Link? That also affects auras. I think your like aura and command abilities is like a templated word that they use. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that Warlord Train is pretty useless regardless. Oh no, so Synaptic Linchpin also affects Synaptic Imperatives, which is the cool thing. And it specifically calls out command phase abilities that specify a range, which Synaptic Link, I don't believe, specifies a range. Synaptic Link is just Synaptic Link. It's not 12 inches. That's a weird one. We probably need a clarification on it, but I would hazard to guess that any range manipulation effects do not, don't affect like non-standard measurement range measurements. That's how it's always worked, and I don't think it would have changed. Any favorite combos yet? I like just stacking a bunch of melee attacks and then making them using the multi-swing weapons. That's kind of my favorite, but I'm sure dedicated Chaos players will come out with some absolute garbage. Discord invite link not working? I don't know why that happens, chat. That's the weirdest thing. Because it's not the link has never changed. The link has always been the same, but sometimes it just doesn't do anything. I don't understand it. You have to copy paste it and put it into your you have to copy and paste it not from YouTube. I think if I put it in the chat it won't work. But you basically have to put it into your thing. You have to retype it out, essentially, and then it should work. Yeah, I don't know. The YouTube embed, if you copy and paste the text specifically, it takes it copies like a referral code, basically, a YouTube kind of tracking code, and you have to pull that out before you hit center. It's bizarre. So I don't know. I believe in you. I just did it on my end and it worked. Looks like there was some thought put into this one, which is more you could say for the more recent codexes. Yeah, I agree with that. What's the profile for the Gatling cannon? I guess we can look at weapons. Where's the weapons page at? There it is. Oh no, that's points values are back. Thanks to Spoiler. Thanks for not having the weapons that you can take. It's weird that they have all these like spare space on these pages and they don't use it to put the weapons in that they use. Weapon profiles. Here we go. Avenger. That's a chain cannon. Despoiler Gatling cannon. There it is. Heavy 12, strength 6, AP 2, 2 damage. I don't think it changed at all, right? That was exactly what it was in the previous version. Yeah, you can blame YouTube for the weird link stuff. So I think the army will be meta breaking or at least competitive against other top armies. It remains to be seen. I think it will be competitive. I mean, it's so like the meta's so fucked right now, right, though. Like you can't make it, you know, like a tier list of competitive play currently because it's kind of, you know, it's like whatever they decided to break at the top. And then there's like an echelon of armies that can kind of fight each other, and then there's the rest of the game. And I feel like this one probably goes into the echelon of armies that kind of fight each other. But like, will this army be competitive against Tyranids? Probably not, because I have no idea how you beat Tyranids. Like playing an optimized Tyranid list, I have no idea how you beat them. It's basically impossible. But, I mean, if you're talking about like the next level of powerful stuff, I think, yeah, this army's probably pretty viable into that. Meta is good minus bugs and Eldar. That's probably the case, yeah. Is there a way to make custom households? Yeah, you're basically just pick a Dreadblade trait and everybody gets that. It's kind of sad, to be honest. But I mean, it's basically the same as taking a regular household. Your abilities are pretty similar. But anyway, with that, chat, I think I'm gonna go ahead and pop off. Know how to beat Tyranids is West Phoenix data slate? I don't know. You know how you beat Tyranids, chat? Is you go play a different game and stop paying for GW products. I'm salty right now. I apologize, chat. I was tweeting about this earlier, but I'm a little burned on the Tyranid Codex release, but that's a discussion for another time. I talked about that on Tuesday. You can go watch probably the first 20 minutes of my stream on Tuesday. I talked about the Tyranid Codex and my thoughts about it, and you can go check that out there. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up there. Thanks everyone for coming out and hanging out with me, and as we talked about the Knights Codex, I appreciate it very much. And I hope everyone's psyched for new Knight rolls. I think it's going to be cool. Knights are interesting to play against. And it does feel like slowing down the threat range of the Knights, and also, you know, with the new terrain rules, you know, different from the previous version of the game, where Knights could basically see everything on the table because you use tree line of sight. I think Knights are in a much more interesting, you know, space to play against, where previously they would go second and you would go into defensive positions and you would shoot them, and then they would not do anything and then they would die, versus they went first and they would run halfway across the table and kill you, and that sucked. But now it feels like they're much slower, but they're much tankier and have a lot more interesting synergies going on, which I like a lot better. All right, chat. Was the Dreadblade ability to soup true? Yeah, they get Agents of Chaos if you take them a Dreadblade unit, single Dreadblade model in another Chaos Detachment. Yeah, have a good weekend, everybody. Nurgle Matt, nice to see you in chat, dude. Have a good one, and hope everyone has some good games over the weekend and has a good one, and just, you know, chills out and has a good time. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and drop it there. Thanks everyone for watching.